Are we ready? We're live?
Yes, we're ready. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good morning. It's April 12th, 2018. This is the Landscape Architecture Committee of the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners being held in Nashville, Tennessee. We have several things to discuss in our LA committee meeting today, and we have 4 applications that I'm aware of that have extenuating circumstances. I would like to discuss those. I've also asked Liz to look into the possibility or to determine the discretion we have as a board, the committee and the board, to allow minor adjustments. I'm assuming if the applications don't necessarily meet the absolute letter of every word in our law. So with that, Liz, I'll let you begin. And also, she provided us with paperwork.
Yes, so Tony and I did some legal research into whether or not the Landscape Architect Committee and the full board had any leeway regarding approving applications. So in looking at the rules, our rules essentially direct us straight to the statute, which prevents wiggle room. With rules, we can make those changes pretty easily within our department and go through the rulemaking process that you guys are familiar with. When it's a statute issue, we're a little bit more concrete, and that's when we're looking at a potential statutory change. So what I've provided you is the statute 62-2, 801 through 803, and then also the comedy statute 62-2-304. And like I said before, the rules essentially direct us straight to the statute as far as requirements for the landscape architects. And it essentially says that, so Blair's question was, if somebody has registered in another state and has a CLARB certificate, can we just approve them through comedy here in Tennessee? And the answer is they have to meet the requirements of this chapter of our statute. So they have to meet the 3 years of practical experience, and they have to meet the accredited curriculum. So unfortunately, even those that have registrations in other states' requirements are different than Tennessee's. They might not have to have an accredited degree in those states, or they might not have the same amount of practical experience requirements. So in that sense, we can't just approve them here. As far as having them have just a CLARB certificate and have that be a substitute, that seems like it seems like that might be a solution. However, the CLARB requirements don't necessarily meet Tennessee's minimum requirements either. So when Tony and I were looking into our research, we looked at the comedy statute, so 62-2-304. And in 2016, the architects added a provision, Section B, to give an option as far as approving applications for those that have an NCARB certificate. So we believe that the change would need to occur to Section B to add the landscape architects and add a provision there for the committee and the board to be able to approve applications if they are receiving a CLARB certificate, and using that as the standard instead of our state minimum requirements for those who are registered in other states and have met another state's minimum requirement and also have a CLARB certificate. So that would be where we believe the change needs to be made. We both thought it was a great idea to be able to expand licensure and make it less restrictive. This statute, as far as for the landscape architects, has not been altered since 1988, we believe. So the CLARB minimums have changed since then as well. So we think that would be a positive change. As far as who needs to make the change, this could be added to a department bill for next session. With the governor changing over this year, it might be better for the national or state organizations to pursue this change. I think they would certainly have the support of the department as far as this change, though, since the architects achieved this change in 2016. It seems like an easy go-to to add the landscape architects to that provision B, so you can have that leeway. So if you have any questions, but that was our research, and that was our what we think would be the most efficient outcome for the future.
So looking back to 2016, when the architects took this through the process and made that adjustment, how was that accomplished? Was that a department bill, or was that something that came through the other direction with the professional society or whomever?
I think that one was a department bill.
Okay. What you're saying is because of the timing with the election and so on, it may not be quite as easy.
Right. I'm not saying that it couldn't get on there, but I think you would have a better guarantee of the legislature having it in front of them if the societies at least initiate the process.
To the chase, I think what you're telling us is the applications that we have that where they don't have these requirements, we're not allowed to approve.
That's correct.
Until a change is made.
That's correct. Unless they meet one of the statutory exceptions, which in the landscape architect statute there's not many, then no, you can't approve it. We've got to follow the statute. But that's where I think the statutory change, just like the architects made in 2016, would provide a little more leeway for application approvals. And since the CLARB standards have been updated since then, I think we need to update our statute as well, and make it less restrictive for applicants that are registered in other states and have their CLARB certificate to be able to practice landscape architecture here in Tennessee. It seems to be what the board consensus has been over the past few meetings as well. So.
We were to advise the people that we're going to have to turn down, so to speak. It appears to me like it's at least a year, maybe 2 years before that can change. Is that correct?
If I could add, what a lot of programs do is, and it looks like that's what the architects probably intended, is to make it simple, is say follows NCARB and follows, and you put in the statute. That way, when future changes come up in the next few years, you're not going back in and asking for a law revision. Just the fact that we're compliant with them, it's always easier to be in compliance when you're stricter and more, limiting people to come in and work. I think the change would be perfect and be taken on, but that way you don't add too much more language. We really just want to be in line with them.
Strange question, but if we got weird and actually turned around and approved them, what would be the consequences?
I don't think we could actually approve
You'd
them
have
if they
to
don't
say,
meet the
well, you can't do
exceptions.
that. Yeah, okay.
They wouldn't be eligible for.
We don't need to put the applicants in an awkward position. False hope necessarily, but I like that question.
So I think I got a little confused. So 62-2-304 is what the architects
Yes,
did.
So that's for the comedy applications, which is where most of the issues have come in with the Landscape Architecture Committee. They've said, okay, well, this person is registered in Kansas, or just for an example, and they have their CLARB certificate, so can't we just approve them? Well, our comedy statute, when talks about landscape architects specifically says they have to meet the requirements of this chapter. So they still have to meet our landscape architecture, excuse me, minimum requirements for application, which would be the accredited degree and the practical experience.
And it says, is this just for architects in B, subsection B?
Yeah, that's just for architects.
Okay.
They added that in 2016. I'm not sure why landscape architects wasn't also added at that time, but B does not apply to them right now. It would be great if B did apply to them, because then they would have that leeway to say, okay, they're registered in Kansas and they have their CLARB certificate, so we're going to approve them through comedy here in Tennessee, even though they don't necessarily meet our Tennessee minimum standards.
Yes. That alone, of 3 of the 4 applicants, that would make the difference, or at least give us the voting power to review them. So it's really unfortunate that we have no wiggle room whatsoever. And the applicants they're not necessarily similar, but I believe all of them have CLARB certificates. It's real interesting when you read through this, and I doubt that there's any professional in the state of Tennessee that would deny these applicants based on the qualifications that they bring to us. So it's make that recommendation. And
I think this would be something that the department could work with the national and state organizations on. It seems like this would be one that they would be in support of, especially since the architects already have this provision. I just was giving you the background as far as the timing, just to guarantee that your change gets put in front of the legislature. I don't want it to get brushed aside. So that was just my advice as far as reaching out for help to the organizations.
Understand. I think that's wise advice. My view is the sooner we make provisions, the better for the landscape architects. So
what do we do to get that?
Well, Nathan was here a moment ago, and I believe that I'm going to need and want to talk to ASLA, who is the primary representative of landscape architects, and see if they wouldn't run with this and take this and help guide them. I am a member of CLARB, and we have the direct connections, and so that will be helpful as well. So we'll put this in place. Those who may be listening, I want them to understand that we're in a tough spot here, and we just don't feel like a decision can be made necessarily at this time until changes are made to our law. So, in doing so, set aside for the time being.
No, I agree. Yeah.
And I have no other new business, no additional old business unless you do.
Do we need to make any kind of motion for you to go forward? And I mean, is that proper, or is that just something that happens?
I think if the committee and then the full board wants to make a motion that they would like to see a statute change, that it couldn't hurt.
I think that's good for just backup, right? I mean,
Yes.
That
Yes.
way it's not just you or ASLA out there doing it. I think it's entirely appropriate. And so I'll make a motion to request that ASLA or the correct entity seek a legislative change that gives the board discretion for landscape architects to be approved by committee based on a CLARB certificate. Does that sound about right?
Sounds right.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And
Move we adjourn.
move we adjourn.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
There's that one application you need to look at, Mr. Price's, or maybe he
Yes.
falls under what y'all just talked about.
He does.
Okay.
He does. He sure does. He fits into that. Unfortunately, he does. So
at
thank
this
you.
point, I think, given that we know it's going to take a year or so, we will put together a letter with the guidance from legal counsel and make sure that we explain that right now they don't meet the minimum requirements for us to license. We'll be denying them. Based on that, they can reapply at any point when there's this change. That way those applications are actually closed, if in fact they did apply.
If I'm correct, I believe this is the only actual
I
application
think so.
that
I
we
think
have.
the rest were inquiries.
So, and I believe when someone applies to the state of Tennessee, we keep this for 5 years. So his official application will still be in internal.
Correct.
So
Yes.
he will not need to reapply, assuming these changes can be made within several years, a year or so.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are adjourned. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
It allows us to not. Architectural and Engineering Examiners meeting. This is April the 12th, 2018, and this has been posted to the Board of Architects and Engineers website on April 5th. So to get it going, can we have a roll call, please?
Susan Ballard.
Here.
Robert Campbell.
Here.
Ricky Bersai.
Here.
Grant Minshew.
Here.
Blair Parker.
Here.
Brian Tibbs.
Here.
Rick Thompson.
Here.
Frank Wagster.
Here.
Kathy Ware.
Here.
Alton Heathcote.
Tickled to pieces to be here.
Stephen King. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Wanda. And if you hadn't noticed, there's a new name that we heard in the roll call here. It's Grant Minshew. And Grant, you want to kind of tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from and so forth?
I'm very excited to be here with you all. Grant Minshew grew up here in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm now working here in Nashville at an organization called Tennesseans for Student Success. Advocate for K-12 education. Live here in Creve Hall with my wife Haley. She's in healthcare sales, and just looking forward to get to know you all and working with you for the year.
Well, we're looking forward to meeting with you too.
Did you get my car keys?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, new board members are legally required to go pull our vehicles around to the front and pick us up after meetings. So
Valet service.
I
Good
didn't
deal.
know that
All right,
you got my
pass
car.
them along.
Is that not right? Is that correct?
I told him about breakfast, too.
Lunch included.
Just be glad you don't have to pay his bar tab.
Yeah, we should be zero by then. It's not my daughter we're talking about.
And before we go on, Assistant Commissioner Carter Lawrence is here, and so to be make good use of his time, if Carter, if you would like to make your presentation,
Absolutely.
you're open for that.
Well, thank you very much. We'll say hello to our newest member. I like that we're switching up, that the new members have alternating color nameplates now. This is a fun new change that we're doing. They say that white catches the eye the best, so maybe we're going to see the most contributions from our two members bookending the.
Maybe that's
commission.
just a plea forgiveness for what we don't know. Just an indicator.
Oh, it's a white flag?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, Grant, you'll appreciate they turn their nameplates up. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so he's ready to go. Thanks for letting me come down, and also to jump to the top of the agenda. There were a couple things I wanted to talk with y'all about. One of them is the fee reductions, and I apologize that did not get the information to you earlier. Bill was traveling last week. Unfortunately, his supervisor approved a vacation for him. So that's me, and I barely survived without him. So really glad that he's back, and he'll distribute this, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But there are two other things I want to talk with you about first. And the first of those was related to the executive director search. I've already had a couple conversations with board members related to this to talk about my plan and get feedback related to it, and had very great conversations. So I appreciate the feedback and input that I got there. And I'm very happy to be able to take off the interim tag and make official and permanent for you your new full-time executive director, Roxana Gamusio. And I thought this was a really easy decision, as Roxana got to demonstrate both to me and to you her competence, her expertise in managing this program. We came up with a plan to move some of Roxana's responsibilities onto her assistant director, so that the assistant director is going to be taking an increased role related to some of the other programs over which Roxana has authority. So this is going to let Roxana really focus on architects and engineers to make sure that you are receiving the same great experience that you have from an administrative standpoint. And I know that Roxana is really capable at doing this, that she's very responsive, and that she and her staff are going to be as available to you as they have been in the past. So I think Roxana is doing a fantastic job, and was really pleased that she was willing to take this responsibility, and was really happy about that. So thanks so much, Roxana.
Thank you all. Thanks.
Yeah. So I don't. This feels like the sort of time when I would hand over for a speech. I don't. If you want to say anything, you're welcome to.
No. We're good.
Okay.
We've been working together beautifully. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Frank,
Actually start to be mean to you.
You can. Thank you.
I would note, though, that you are still officially required to be nice to me. Whatever changes might happen here.
Officially.
And Mr. Chair, I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to, before I move on to the other matters that I wanted to talk about, if there's anything on that, I wanted to pause, see if you wanted to address that.
Of course, I'll open it up to anybody that wants to comment, but as far as I've seen, Roxana has really done a good job jumping right into kind of a tough situation initially, and so I really appreciate what she's done to handle the amount of work that we have associated with this board.
Thank you. I'd like to compliment you on your responsiveness. Even after 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I really do appreciate and admire that. And also congratulate you on the outcome of the new newsletter. I think that's fantastic. And if I understand correctly, that's sort of under your direction this time, right?
We pushed it out the door, but I can't take credit for any of it. I'll take the blame for it being delayed and some of the news not being relevant. So we'll definitely discuss future newsletters and how to better put out there quickly what is relevant to protect the public.
From an appearance standpoint, though, and a functionality, I like the new format, and thank you for whatever role you played in that.
Welcome, my pleasure.
And congratulations.
I appreciate it.
I don't want to let Roxana get away with taking full blame on the newsletter delay there. There are a lot of factors that worked against the timely dissemination of that, of which that does not rest on Roxana. So I think that was noble of you to take it, and I think that it is worth noting that Roxana did a great job of pushing that through, both at my level and then at the other levels that have to approve it. So I appreciate you saying that, Roxana, but and she deserves the commendations, but I don't think for the delay in it that should fall on her. Should fall on you.
Right. Thanks.
Okay. Well, fantastic. So that was the first thing that I want to talk about. The second was related to QBS, and I know that I sent all of you an email, and many of you responded. So it's going to be today, beginning at 2 o'clock, when the first of the QBS working group discussions that are going to happen. Just a little bit of back history. This is responsive to the ongoing discussions that that we had over the last year, and then also related to House Bill 2471, which was taken off notice, with the comment from the sponsors that there was going to be an effort to bring together the interested parties. So had conversations with board members, with outside groups, and convening together board members and these other parties, which I had alluded to in the email to walk you through. There will be representatives from General Services, from the Comptroller's Office, from CTAS, and from MTAS. I will be present purely in a facilitating role that will help move the meeting along. It's my hope to not really have input. I just want to chair it kind of in a traditional sense, that I'm there to make sure that we stay on topic. And then I will turn over to Frank to talk about, as you know in the email, that he was going to be selecting 3 board members to represent the board and the industry to speak on behalf of the board related to this QBS guidance. So, Frank, I'll turn back to you.
I've talked to the people that I'm fixing to select to be participants in this meeting. And by the way, everybody is invited to listen in, and if asked to take part, I'm assuming you can take part. But anyway, that would be Bob Campbell, Blair Parker, and Rick Thompson. And I would like to have been there, but I've got commitments that I've got to make this afternoon.
And I should note, for those who cannot physically be here, it's going to be an open meeting and will be recorded the same as any of our meetings, so it will be available for you to review in the future. I think we're in this room. I'll have to confirm with Madeline. Yeah. It's here. Yeah, so it'll be right here, the same setup that we're accustomed to. So we're going to move forward with that. I'm not sure how many meetings it'll take to hammer this out and make that guidance available, but we are ready, the other parties are ready, and in it for however long it's going to take to provide some guidance. So I really think this is going to be a win, as we are providing guidance both internally to our registrants and something that the public bodies are going to be able to rely on. So I think we're going to end up in a really ideal place in the end. So any questions related to the QBS working group discussion happening?
I'd say a word about the purpose. I think most of us here are familiar with why this is taking place and what our role is and what it isn't. But you might just...
Absolutely. So the back history is... do you want me to go back to the very beginning, to the formation of QBS? Because I would have to defer to others more knowledgeable than myself.
Not necessarily.
Okay. So in the immediate term, there were questions related to QBS and the guidance that we had made available that was registrant focused, and questions arose from the public body, from the exterior focus, as far as how it was applicable for them and what sort of guidance the board could provide to them. So related to those questions and some ongoing discussions, the FAQs that had traditionally provided guidance for the registrants related to the topic of QBS were removed from the website subsequent to a administrative review. This initiated ongoing conversations, the legislation that I mentioned earlier, and the continued desire to provide guidance to both the registrants and the public bodies are what spurred a group that is both internal and comprised of registrants and external with representatives of public bodies.
And it's kind of the external part that we don't have purview over.
That's right.
That brings up the need for some external auditing, or however you want to say that.
Sure. Yeah. So, and a good point to remind on that the board's authority related to QBS is registrant focused, and the statute and the rule allow the board to discipline licensees, registrants rather, for violations of QBS, but have no impact on the public bodies. And that's really the kind of the missing component that we think that this working group discussion in a group that includes both the registrants and the public bodies will be able to come up with a guidance that will let everyone better understand what QBS is, how it's applicable to them, and how they can comply with it, which we really understand to be the goal, that people want to comply, and we're just trying to make sure that the guidance is going to be applicable for registrants and for the public bodies in an understandable manner.
Okay. Anybody else
I
have
got a
questions on
question.
that?
So what's the desired outcome? Is it a piece of paper, or is it an ongoing discussion, or what, is there an intent for a specific outcome?
I think the desired outcome would be that the guidance that is crafted from this group would be in such a format that it could be placed on the state website, potentially in multiple locations on the state website, and would be in a form that could be disseminated through other fashion as well. But this would be that it could be easily hosted online as well. Easy to understand, easy to disseminate, are kind of the goals that I have for it. If the working group has a different vision for it, we're certainly open to it. But I think the guidance that we got in working through this with the associations, with the legislators, was that we would be providing something that can be hosted on the state website. Okay, so there's the first two. I apologize, I'm taking up so much of your time. The third one could potentially be the most fun of all, as we talk about fee reductions. Bill, could you come up here? Even though I believe all of you know Bill Huddleston, I'll let Bill introduce himself before we go forward.
Hello, Bill Huddleston, Director of Accounting for Regulatory Boards.
And Bill is a familiar face, as I guess we were down here 3 months ago and then also 2 months ago talking fee reductions, and it kind of pressed pause on the fee reduction discussion 2 months ago in order to allow the finances to crystallize a little bit. And part of that, what has crystallized now, is with Roxana as the executive director, that there are cost savings that are realized and made permanent in your budget that we can better reflect now as we project forward in order to make the decisions related to fee reductions. So what you have in front of you, what Bill passed out, is the relevant information related to fee reductions. You have a couple of columns. The first, under 4-year average, is demonstrating to you what you could expect with no changes made to fees whatsoever. The second column, under projected 2019 140, is what you could expect with everything the same except for that minor fee reduction that we began 3 months ago. Is that the right timeline? 3 months ago?
I think part of it was a little bit before then, but that's fee reductions that we've already actually that the board's actually already approved.
So those were for the interns and for test fees, and that it was relatively minor, about $19,000. And then that final column, the projected 2019, shows if you were to reduce the fees by $15, as we had discussed back 2 months ago. And this is, by the way, although I take it everyone understands this, what you see on your total expenditures includes the yearly grants that you're doing. So this is that $114,000 fiscal year balance anticipated is still presuming that you are doing the maximum allowed grants of $350,000. So with let's call it $114,000 that we would anticipate in fiscal year balance, even after lowering the fees to $125,000, this is still a very healthy amount that we'd be continuing to add to the reserve. So I was fully comfortable with this. Probably more importantly, Bill, a very conservative numbers guy, felt very comfortable that the board is still going to be in totally safe territory with this. So it would be my recommendation that the board consider reducing its fees by $15. And with that, I'll just stop, let you digest, and ask any questions that you might have to both myself or Bill.
So when would this take effect?
So we'd start if there was a motion and you passed it, we would start the rulemaking process immediately. It would not take effect for about 9 months, given the long period that it takes to make rules effective.
So I had also made a suggestion about educators' fees and those over 65. Was that included in any of this? I don't see notes on it, so I'm just asking.
Right. Yeah, so there were a couple of suggestions that were made. For example, that also related to academics and exempting them from fees that are difficult for us to administratively function. So to take the example of academia, how would we define involvement in academia? If we said, for example, that it was only college professors, would we say that they have to teach it full-time, that they have to be tenured? And then because we don't track that, we would have to come up with new methods for tracking it. So because some of those were, for lack of a better term, and I hope you'll forgive this, kind of messier changes, what I wanted to recommend were just kind of cleaner across the board that has a more easily discernible impact than something that we have a difficult time projecting forward.
Just for clarification on the footnote for FN3, I'm assuming the $15 decrease, the last sentence that says in-state and comedy, that's the 15% of all applications are in-state and comedy applications and 85% are renewals. Is that what that's intended to be?
That's right. This is based on the transactions that from that we actually received payments on. So yes, ma'am, that's right.
Okay. Just want to make sure I understood what that note meant.
More comments? Must have done a good job.
I give that to Bill. Well done, Bill.
Thanks.
Do you need a motion then from us?
That,
Is that the correct thing, is to have a rulemaking hearing, or is it just to reduce it?
my hope was that there would be a motion that would be passed by the board to begin the rulemaking process for lowering the fees by $15.
I'll make a motion then that we authorize staff to begin the rulemaking process to reduce the fee from $140 to $125 with the conditions that they have listed on the footnotes.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Do we need to clarify which footnote we're voting on?
The footnotes are relevant for all of the information overall. The motion, as I understand it, is that you would be voting on approving what you see in projected 2019 with the 125. So that's lowering the fees by $15, but the footnotes would be relevant for informing your total understanding of the document.
I think my motion was to reduce it to fit by 140 to 125.
Reference the footnote. So.
If there's no other discussion, we'll vote on it. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much, and thanks for letting me use so much of your time this morning. I'll
Okay.
look forward to seeing all of you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, we'll get back in the groove now. I'd like to acknowledge, or at least our guests. If you would, please let us know who you are and who you're representing. And I don't think they're hearing me.
I'm Chris Qualley. I'm representing the American Society of Civil Engineers.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Casey Anderson, American Council of Engineering Companies of Tennessee and the Tennessee Society of Professional Engineers.
Ashley Cates, Executive Vice President.
And I guess, do we have any announcements? We have a place for them, but if there aren't any, we'll move on. I know everybody has received or should have received copies, and I guess it's on our iPad of the December and February minutes.
Yes, sir, they are. The December updated starts on page 4. After I sent them out a couple of times because I unfortunately had a couple of live versions of them with the updates. I think that the version that you see is correct except for one item regarding one of the cases and a board member that assisted in the analysis recusing themselves. That's an update. So I do have a paper version if anybody wanted to see it. All I'm doing on case number 7 is making a note of the board member that participated in that analysis. And that prompted the question of, as Sarah, our litigating counsel for complaints, asks board members to participate and help analyze and help us understand bits and pieces, to be consistent so that one member doesn't recuse themselves and the others forget to, and then it could look odd. We're always going to list on the legal report which member participated and assisted and therefore is recusing themselves. That way we'll be consistent moving forward, because I went back other minutes and it looked like we weren't doing that, and so I just want us to be consistent moving forward. So in this particular minutes, if everyone's okay with it and we vote them, I made one more change you're not seeing, which is for the case number 7. I just added the footnote that Mr. Parker was recusing himself from the vote. The remaining members concurred, and that would have been on case number 7.
That's on the December minutes?
That's correct. That's for the December. And moving forward, we will make sure when you look at the legal report, it already has that footnote in there.
So we'll take these individually. Would anybody like to move that we approve the December meeting minutes? And I would assume you would want to refer to the case 7 footnotes. That
As
are
amendment. As
Yes.
amended, yeah.
Have a motion.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, I need to recuse myself because I wasn't here in December from voting. Okay.
Other. There being no other discussion, all in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And we'll move to the February minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review the February minutes? If so, do I have a motion to approve the February minutes?
Make a motion we approve the February minutes as printed.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There being no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. And now we'll move on to the professional society reports. Any? Right. Nathan, you're the man.
The short straw. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be with you on this beautiful spring day. We haven't had many of those so far. First item of business, I guess, with my landscape architect hat on, is our annual conference will be the first weekend in May. That's the 3rd and the 4th, and we're always excited about those. I believe we're fully booked on corporate sponsorship, which y'all know for all membership organization, anytime you can create some non-dues paying income, that's a good day at the office. So we're tickled about that. We always learn that even though it's expensive, people like to come to Nashville, that those are our meetings that have the highest attendance typically. To shift gears over to our legislative friends, they're almost done. They can see the end from here, but they're not there yet. The appropriations bill will be considered, and y'all remember that's the only bill they have to pass because that keeps state government working. Will be in committee next week and probably on the floor next week. And when they pass that the end is. let's see, we have a host of elections this year. Here in Nashville, where you're having so much fun with them, we're even going to get to have an extra one. So we'll have a local government primary election for the courthouse crowd. The officials y'all don't know very well, possibly the county clerks, maybe some judicial vacancies on May the 1st, which is just around the corner. Early voting just started for that. And here in Nashville, we'll elect a mayor to fill the remainder of the unexpired term on May the 24th. But more importantly for y'all are the August and November election cycles. On August the 2nd, we'll have primary elections for our state and federal officers. And I'd particularly bring your attention to the state ones. I know the federal ones are important, but for state public policy, we're going to have a new governor. So sometimes we make fun of our governors, particularly at the end of their terms, because that's the wane of their power. But it's the most important. It's the only statewide elected office in Tennessee. And it really sets the tone for the conversation on a host of different levels. And y'all know we have 4 candidates in the Republican primary and 2 in the Democrat. I would encourage you to get to know them, because if the election were today, I don't know who wins that. And then the general election would be in November. So it's always good to have a friend in the governor's office, and it might not be that candidate himself, but who would be their chief of staff, or who would be, I'm a lawyer nerd, so I always wonder who their general counsel will be. So I would encourage you to engage with all of the campaigns, and it makes it more. And also, we have federal elections coming along. We'll elect a new U.S. Senator this time, and 3 new House. Encourage your colleagues and your friends and family members to engage in the electoral process. Our muscles atrophy if we don't exercise them. I know it's one of those things. I know when I talk to the lawyers in my office, sometimes I'm annoying because I encourage them to do that. It doesn't pay. You don't make a nickel for doing that, but it makes you a better professional, and it makes you an opinion leader in your community. And that's what we want to be, because when we talk about important things like qualifications-based selection, it gives you a credibility as a subject matter expert, and that's what I hope for the profession. Happy to respond to your questions, comments, observations. Always grateful for the time, particularly when I get an extra dose from Casey.
So this is a question, and Blair, I don't mean to, you all have talked about what we discussed in the landscape architect meeting?
Not spoken.
Okay.
We have communicated with a quick email.
Okay, well, just make sure we discussed something earlier that
I saw the email, and I think it's something we all need to talk about. I don't know what the answer is.
Well, no, I don't. I just want to make sure that you all had.
Okay.
I thought you had, but I just want to make sure, and the rest of the board will hear something about it.
It's on our list of things to think about.
Okay,
so we just hadn't done that yet. So, and we look forward to the opportunity. So, okay, thanks. Bye.
Casey Anderson with the engineers, in the process of handing things over to Nathan. I neglected to tell him that the Tennessee Engineers Conference, which is a joint conference of ACEC, TSPE, and ASCE, and the structural engineers, will be September 17th and 18th at the Franklin Cool Springs Marriott, and we would very much like for you all to have representatives there. I have no idea on what day and what time, so if anyone prefers one thing over another, please let me know.
And that's on Monday and Tuesday?
It is a Monday, different this year, but we will be in the whole place. So,
okay. Any questions? Since you're bringing up things like that, Rick and I were at the NCARB regional meeting in Wichita, Kansas, earlier this year, and it was announced that the regional meeting for NCARB will be in Nashville, Tennessee next March. And so I would assume they would want to get with our board, and I'm sure there's some organization. They may have it all organized for all I know. But anyway, it'll be here next year.
Wichita sounds super.
Oh, just
Glenn Campbell.
Yeah. Yeah, Rick.
One thing, Frank, correct me if I'm incorrect, but NCARB was started in Nashville, Tennessee 100 years ago, and that has more significance to the meeting being here. So it's great, going to be a great celebration. So go Tennessee, right? All right.
Good morning. I'm Ashley Cates, Executive Vice President of AIA Tennessee. We're wrapping up session. We're still pushing the historic tax credit legislation that hopefully will get some sort of funding. We're crossing our fingers, and if not, we'll be back next year. That's the only piece of legislation that we have outstanding right now. We're focused now on, did you mention the gubernatorial forum? Yeah. So we're hosting with the engineers and the landscape architects and the contractors and the SMPS, which is the marketing arm of the architects, contractors, and engineers, a gubernatorial forum on May 9th. So if you haven't received your email, let me know, and I will make sure that you get an email for it. But it's going to be here in Nashville at the City Winery. So we're looking forward to it. It's going to be a big year for us with the elections coming up. Other than that, we have our conference that's going to be here this summer in Franklin at the Marriott Cool Springs. They're getting a lot of business from us, it seems. July 23rd through 25th. So we're excited about it. And if you all would like to be our guests, we'd love to have you. Thank you. Any questions, I guess? Sure.
I don't hear any, but thanks, Ashley.
Don Baltimore, representing the Tennessee Interior Design Coalition, also known as Tennessee IDEA. I'll just reiterate and adopt the previous reports, and we're glad to hear that the refund on sales tax for rehabbing historic buildings is perhaps still alive and going. We all in this room are interested in preserving our heritage and the structures that represent it, and hopefully that will pass this year. And at this time of the year in the legislature, at the last few weeks, you never know what's going to happen. Rules get suspended, legislation gets revived and passed quickly, so we'll all be keeping an eye on these pieces of legislation that are still out there floating around. Thank you. Any questions?
I don't see any questions, so thank you. I noticed we've got some new visitors here. If you would, please stand up and introduce yourself. Okay, thank you. Well, we've been waiting on y'all. Yeah.
My name is Jerry Carter. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the National Council.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm Paul Terrell. I'm the Northeast Zone Vice President. We are down.
Great. Glad to have you.
Yes.
And just for information, Jerry's a short timer, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good deal.
And Dana, since y'all are here, why don't you come on up and let us know how things are going.
So Susan Ballard asked us to drop by today and give y'all an update on how the special grant is going that y'all awarded UTC Interior Design, UTC Engineering, and UTK Architecture. And with the $20,000 grant, what we did was we created a community studio in a low-income part of Chattanooga on Dodds Avenue. That's the Ridgedale community. We were fortunate in that we were able to find alumni who had a I'm going to use the word abandoned slightly loosely, but an old church that was not functioning. And they actually gave us space to put in our studio. In return, we used part of our grant money, the part that would have gone towards rent, into getting the space habitable. In particular, we upgraded part of the electricity and have it worked to make the bathroom ADA compliant. We began having classes in the fall that were multidisciplinary, and we began finding our clients by partnering with a local organization called Widows Harvest. It's, as it sounds like, it's widows who own their own homes and often don't have the means of maintaining their homes. As the second semester came in, we also partnered with Habitat for Humanity and worked on some of their projects that were renovation, not new builds. But the whole idea was that it would be a hands-on learning experience for our students, multidisciplinary, roll up your sleeves, get to know people in the community that may not be like you, and in turn the way we were giving back was we were doing home upgrades that had to do with energy efficiency and accessibility. So as you can see from the handout I've given you, the projects our students have done range from building and installing wheelchair ramps to taking out low 1970s style toilets and putting in ADA toilets. They've put in a shower. We changed lots of light bulbs. We changed lots of door hardware. Lots of things that people take for granted that these older homes just don't have. And really feel that we've been doing an impact in our community. Right now, I believe we've completed 7 of our 10 jobs that we guaranteed. We have 3 in process. I think we have a little extra money, and we'll probably be bringing in an 11th job before the semester is over. And I think what I'll do is step aside and let these 2 ladies, because as students, they've been working on projects, they may be able to give you a slightly different point of view. Hold that.
Oh, it's red. Thank you guys for awarding the grant to us. It's been a huge help to these families and low-income individuals in our area. Gosh, you did a great job going over the general thing. I guess I can kind of take you through when we have a project that we're working on. We go in and take 2 checklists. We have an accessibility checklist and an energy efficiency checklist. And I think in your handout it says one of the classes, which was a responsive design class, kind of took that on as a challenge to make those checklists in conjunction with us. So that way we could take these into the homes and assess their needs with the client as well. Let's see what else. So we kind of prioritize their needs with them based on maybe some requests they have or maybe some ailments that are coming forth. It's the hands-on experience, I think, for the students, even being able to work with a client, because oftentimes you don't get that experience in school per se. You really get that experience out of school, but it's nice to be able to have that hands-on experience and be able to communicate with a client about their needs, and also realize that you can't give them everything that they wish for, which in school, you have an unlimited budget basically, and you can do whatever you want. But it's nice to be able to assess these with the client. Let's see, what else?
Yeah, speaking from a student perspective, most of the classes we have are, in class, you don't get a real-world experience. So this class offered us a huge opportunity. It was really eye-opening to speak directly with clients, to help them and see the effect of what you're doing in their lives. Because you may think fixing a small thing like a ramp or a light fixture is not really much of a deal. I mean, everyone could do that, but for the clients, some of these things were really big deals. So to see the impact of these small things in their lives and how they react to it is a really good experience, and it's really eye-opening.
I went out on one job site in particular. They had just put in a wheelchair ramp, but the sidewalk itself was not usable. It was cracked and had tree roots going through it. And in that one little short visit on the job site, I saw this one with a jackhammer, and this one pouring concrete. And I've never seen that from my students ever. So it's really interesting the what it's exposed the students to. We've created a lot of community partnerships. We're working with EPB. We're working with Green Spaces. And who am I missing? We're working with local landscaping who have been donating some of the landscaping to help not just put in a wheelchair ramp, but to beautify the yard. And anybody that we can reach out to and make connections with, we've been working with. So we have the grant honestly allowed us to do something that we've only talked about. And so the real questions are, where are we going from here? Now, we have not finished the grant, and we're wrapping that up, and we promise to come with this nice presentation when that time comes. But we're also seeking other grants. We think what we have going is something that Chattanooga needs, and we can keep doing. And we definitely have interest, not just from the engineering and the interior design students, and then of course we've got the architecture students who drive down from Knoxville, but we have majors all over campus asking how they can get involved in what we're doing. And I think that's a really valuable thing, because we have so much we can learn from each other. Can I answer questions for y'all?
This is not really a question, it's a two-part thing. First of all, Susan, thank you for your leadership on this. It makes me happy that you're using the God-given abilities that you have, the education that you have, to go further and help the community, but you're also making this education experience a real-world thing, and I think that's something that's just totally missing in most of our educational experiences today, and it saddens me. It really does. Jackhammers and all that, I hope it was ADA compliant, because some attorney's going to try to sue you if it's not.
I'm not going to give you the address.
Okay, good deal. But thank you for your leadership on that. This gives me hope for the future. As we older guys and girls start to move out, that we've got a group of people that are able to take those abilities, and hopefully our grant money can continue to go to those kind of things, because that's when you help the least of these, I think that's a wonderful way for us to be able to give our talents and abilities back. So thank you all very much. You've actually woken me up today, and I may actually be a better board member today for what you said, but appreciate that.
Thank you.
Dana, thank you. Excuse me. As the board member from Chattanooga, I can tell you that this department is stellar. No offense to any of the other interior design programs at UT. UTC is the best. And echoing what Robert said, this really is what part of our profession is about. It's the compassion, the health, safety, welfare, all the things that we do for each other that makes a big difference. It's not all the pretty pictures. So it takes a lot of dedication to get out there and do what you're doing. I have worked with a jackhammer before, and I'm so glad you're doing that now. So thank you.
I want to thank you for coming to share your experience. I think this is fantastic. I also want to, Susan, thank you for your input and guidance and whatever role you played in this. This is creative and innovative, and it's one thing to take the grant money and to buy books or computers or infrastructure, but it's another thing to have to apply this in such a creative, innovative way in a community outreach type program. I'm so grateful to find out that somebody's used these funds for something in a format and a methodology the way that you've used it. Actually, when we meet with the deans in October, this ought to be a story that we tell them. It may give them the opportunity to do exactly the same thing in the areas and the communities that they support. So thank you very much.
I guess we'll let Susan talk to.
Thank you all for coming. I know it's hard to get away from class. for those that are new on the board, one of our main goals was to learn how to work with the other professions, because in school you're in your little class and sometimes you have a joint studio and sometimes you don't. So the goal was to get architecture students, engineering students, interior design and landscape to all work together. So when they submitted their proposals, they were showing us how they could do this, and they've executed it very well. And I want to thank you all so much, and we really look forward to having the whole gang represented in the fall. And so our goal would be to continue this if we can get the positive results that we're seeing and be able to duplicate that and give back to the community. And I think it gives back to the students. And I think you all have a greater insight working with the other professions. And I mean, I do it every day, you know. And I was fortunate to have a joint studio at UT Knoxville. But to have it on the ground and you all are working side by side, I think is even better. So thank you all very much. So.
And I would like to thank Susan also, like everybody else has. But Susan is the chairman of our Grants for Higher Education Committee. And like Alton was saying, we meet at least every other year with the recipients of the grants that we have. And most of that goes to equipment and different needs that the schools have. But this special project actually brings real world into it, and the community service that it presents. I see more value in that one thing than a lot of the other 3D printers and so forth that people buy with the money. But I really appreciate what y'all have done, and looking forward to your final presentation when we get to that.
Thank you, and I say that on many different levels, not just inviting us today, but even just to give us an opportunity. This wouldn't have happened without your grant, just flat out. I will tell you this, on the 23rd, we're having an open house, and all the families that we've been working on their houses are all coming out to the studio, and for those of you anywhere near Chattanooga, y'all would be welcome to come. The address is on the little handout I gave you.
Yes. On a Monday?
It is on a Monday.
Okay.
And it is 4?
Yes, 4 to 6.
4 to 6, so it's after the main work day. We'll get out of y'all's hair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing smiles to our faces.
Roxana,
Yes.
because Carter wasn't here, could you make a special effort on behalf of the board to enlighten him as to their presentation?
Oh, absolutely.
I feel like it's something that certainly everybody on the board recognizes. That is return on investment much higher than any of the other grants relative to equipment. Not that they're not needed, not that they're not warranted, but I'm sorry that he wasn't here, and if you would just reach out to him and make sure he's aware of that, I'd appreciate it.
I've recorded our time of recording so we can pull it up on the video so you can watch it, because I think it's just phenomenal. Kind of, as Robert said, makes us smile and get replenished. Absolutely. Thank you. I think we're on the legal report, but I'll turn it back to you.
Yes.
Good morning, members of the board. Thank you so much for your time in reviewing the legal report today. I will note, just kind of on the front end so that there's not a surprise, I do have one issue at the end of the legal report I'd like to discuss regarding a case that you won't see here, but just to get authority on how to move forward. And I'll talk about that kind of at the end, just in case discussion transforms. And I know we'll probably come up to lunch not too long. But
this is on page 28, if I can, because we have several things on the iPad, so I just want to bring everybody to the right page. Thank you. I apologize.
No, perfect. Thank you, Roxanne. I appreciate that. And so I guess without that, I can start moving through the cases. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And I will do my best to just summarize them for you. But most of them are pretty simple this time around, a few exceptions. The first case we have today, 2017-08-0331, and this is a case where we had an interior architect, or rather an interior designer, list themselves as an interior architect on their website. This is one of those cases that we love to see. As soon as we reached out to this individual, not only were they responsive, understanding, they asked very intelligent questions about how the statute works, how titling works, and they took some time to work with me to decide how they can market themselves for the different unique skills that they have at their design firm, and they made those corrections almost immediately, as well as use that opportunity to educate the other members of their firm. Because of that, I recommended that this just be a simple closure. I think that we've seen great success really in just reaching out to folks in the community about titling issues. And this, in my opinion, this was an exceptional response. If everyone was like this, the world would be better. So my recommendation is to close. I know sometimes we have done warning letters on these cases, but I just felt that this person went above and beyond to educate themselves and others through this opportunity. So
you've heard the report and the recommendation. Do we have a motion on this?
I would like more information. So Sarah, can you tell me if this person is a graduate of a Tennessee program?
I don't know. I cannot recall the school. They are a member of they graduated from an NCARB accredited architecture program.
Okay.
And I'm not sure where their education was. I have that back in my office. I'd have to check. But that is what I recall.
Okay. All right.
Motion to accept.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Second case, 2018-01-0221, involves a professional engineer. Ricky Bursai helped me on this case. We received a complaint from a contractor alleging the architect on the project they were building was grossly negligent in the design of a water backflow preventer. As we went through the case, what appears happens is the architect the engineer, I apologize. The engineer designed a backflow regulator and explained in their drawings with notations that a variance would be required in order to place that inside of the unit, and explained kind of the process. At that point, the plans were turned over and the engineer didn't really hear back until all of a sudden he received a call from the contractor asking for assistance with the variance. When the engineer went out to the site to start drafting information to assist with that variance project, discovered that the contractor had already built the backflow regulator into the structure, did not build it in the way that it was designed, and as a result of all of that, obviously, and you all are more familiar with this, and I remember it from land use, it's difficult to get a variance if you create the problem for yourself, and so that's what happened here, and the contractor had to eat the cost of expanding that area in order to make it compliant on both sides. And so the allegation against, and I'll obviously let Ricky speak to this, we did not see any violations here. It seemed to be more a case of the contractor attempting to shift blame, just to be frank. So if there's any questions on that, or if anything, Ricky, you'd like to add, please let me know.
I think that covers it pretty well. It just looked like the actual installation went in differently than designed, and when the engineer was called to help, it was a done deal. So it was, how do we solve the problem, and that's what happened. So I didn't see any evidence of gross negligence.
Okay, we have a recommendation from legal to close. Do we have any motions on this?
Motion to close.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Case number 3 is 2018-008511. This also is a professional engineer. This respondent self-reported 3 projects that he sealed while his registration was expired. He stated that the lapse was an oversight he caught while he was checking on his status in other states, and happened to notice that he had entered an expired status in Tennessee. I wanted to describe the projects just because I think that helps kind of with scope of practice, but the 3 projects that were sealed during that expiration window were a renovation of a restaurant, a new structure for a taco shop, and a new structure for a restaurant. All those buildings buildings were under 2,000 square feet in wood frame construction. For this case, I gave it the mitigating factor of self-reporting that we like to look at, but also the aggravating factor is that these were 3 commercial projects. I don't think that's really unique necessarily from our other cases where we see this, but I think it's worth noting. So as a result, I recommended what we typically have done, which is the $500 civil penalty for use of an expired registration and the laws and rules examination.
Everyone's heard the report. Do we have a motion? Motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Now, is there any discussion on this issue?
I've just got one quick question. Did he design, says renovation, but these were brand new buildings?
2 were brand new, and 1 was a redesign or retrofitting of a space, of a tenant inset type of space. So 2 were new constructions that he facilitated. Some sort of, I don't know exactly the extent of what he did, but he did seal projects related to 2 different new construction projects.
Was there, it says this is an engineer, so he did some sort of structural work?
I don't know, honestly. He gave me a client list and explained that he was involved in these projects and admitted to sealing a certain number of pages, but I do not have the actual sealed pages. There wasn't any allegations of incompetence or any reason to
We don't know if he sealed all the pages or just...
Typically, if they did, we would have received the letter from the State Fire Marshal's office or potentially from the Codes office, unless, unless it's in a city that doesn't report that. Usually, if they're stamping multiple disciplines, we actually hear it from Codes offices.
Discussion. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Number 4, this is 2018-008481. I have both Ricky and Robert here as reviewers, but it was actually in the context of application review, just so you don't feel surprised if you don't recall this directly, Robert and Ricky. This is a situation where we had a respondent respond to a continued education audit. The respondent did ultimately submit required hours and proof that they had obtained their continued education. However, the hours they reported actually came after what would have been the cutoff based on his license window. So he did comply. He has received all the education he needs to, but he was late reporting by about 2 months on those hours. So as a result of those hours being accrued past that date, I recommended a letter of caution.
Okay, you've heard the report and the recommendation. Do we have a motion on this? We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
We technically need to recuse ourselves, though, or...
In this case, I think it's one of those situations where if you don't feel like your opinion is biased by looking at a reapplication, it is in your hands. If you'd like to, it's fine.
I don't have any idea. I don't have any memory of it, so I reckon that would be okay.
Yes. It's informal discipline I'm recommending, so I'm not too concerned about it.
Okay.
Along with the letter of caution, maybe also some instruction that the hours for the next cycle need to not include what was what was done late.
I think that's a great point, and I'll definitely add that to the letter to ensure that they are new hours, because you're right.
Laws and rules. Should we not add the laws and rules to your letter of caution?
We haven't usually done them with letters, but there is
Okay.
absolutely no reason we can't. So if you'd like to do that, I think we can do that.
Oh,
sounds great. We'll add that on there.
And pass.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
In honor of Philip Lim.
Yes.
Pass and take. Take and pass. All right, and the motion maker, that's okay with the changes?
All those are acceptable.
Okay, and second?
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Case 5 is 2018-008541. This is a professional engineer. In this matter, we didn't have it reviewed, but respondent's license had expired in April 2014. Respondent stated a client had informed him that his license was not listed as active. The respondent stated that during that time he was performing consultant work when the license status was discovered. He contacted the board and learned that he had failed to remit the renewal payment in April 2014. He says that he doesn't recall that specifically, but guesses that it was due to the fact that he was in the middle of moving out of his office, put his office in storage, and was working out of his home temporarily, and just assumes it was a lapse in judgment there. So for mitigating factors, I have self-reported, and two is he stated that he's now working for a large firm where they have someone who handles that, so there's at least an anticipation this won't occur in the future. And for aggravating, this is quite a length of time that the license was expired. I think he ended up resubmitting his information in 2016. So he says he learned of it in 2014 but wasn't doing work requiring it and then needed to re-up his license due to his new job. So leaving it expired doesn't necessarily have to count against you, assuming you're not sealing or doing any work, but it's an error that he could have corrected, I think, in a timely manner. But nothing too unusual, so I recommended the usual $500 civil penalty and laws and rules.
Have the legal report. Do we have a motion?
I make the motion that we approve recommendation from legal.
Okay. Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? There being no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Number 6 is 2018-013791. This individual came to our attention due to applying for comedy in the state of Tennessee. The respondent incorrectly indicated on his NCWS council record that he had not been disciplined in another jurisdiction, but he had actually received a $250 civil penalty that he had paid in Ohio. Our staff timely, informed him of this during that comedy application window. As a result, he went and updated his NCWS council record, and then ultimately withdrew his application from this board, stating that the project he was going to work on ended up not coming to fruition. So he's not licensed with us currently. So as a result of all of that, I recommended a letter of caution regarding submission of incorrect or false information to the board.
Sarah, can you also, I'm assuming you do this as a protocol anyway, bookmark this individual in the event that he tries to reactivate his license?
Yes, this complaint will come up when they apply, and so it will flag it to show that he has, even without a license, he's interacted with our board in some way and received discipline.
You'll know specifically what that was.
Yes, it'll be noted.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Did he give any reason why he checked the box?
He stated that he just hadn't updated the NCEES, and since it was a small penalty, I think just for a delay in applying for CPE, I can't recall exactly, it was an administrative error, whatever it was, that he just had failed to update that portion of the council record. But that if you do search him in the database, it is reflected in his state, in Ohio.
Do we have a motion?
Move to close.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
Close with the issuance of a letter, Kathy?
Correct.
Okay.
Following the recommendation? Yeah, okay. All right. There being no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Case 7 is 2018-016701. This is a professional engineer. We received this one from Codes, kind of similar to what I was talking about earlier, due to this time Codes indicated, rather than our usual thing of multidisciplinary stamp, they actually sent me a picture of the seal. They had a concern with the seal not looking correct, and also not the number as it appeared did not match a licensed registrant. When respondent responded and showed where it seems that the seal, and you all are probably more knowledgeable, I have some level just from Photoshop of how layering works, but it appears the seal just did not, in his CAD program, go on properly. You can see where it is a Tennessee seal. Some reason the number didn't transfer right. It said agriculture across it, but it was missing the picture. It really just looked like something didn't go right in the computer. So he corrected it. He is licensed. Everything was valid, and he went and pulled all those plans and reissued them with proper seals. And so as a result, I indicated to close upon issuance of a letter of a warning, because the only thing I saw that the computer glitch when it's solved was that he had signed completely internally inside the seal rather than crossing the edges. So I thought a letter of warning to explain the need for that signature to cross the seal would be an appropriate discipline.
We have the report.
One just quick question. I think if you're going to issue him a letter, let's tell him to refer to Rule Section 01200208 so he specifically knows where to look for that.
Not a problem. And it's always a great one, too, since it has the pictures on there, so it's hard to get it wrong. I'll add that on there.
He'd be a good candidate to take and pass the laws and rules exam. Since one of our rules. So
I don't get to make motions, so but I agree with that.
All right. Do we have a motion? Oh, Rick.
You know, this is so petty that we're dealing with something like this. I just want to make that comment that, you know, the guy screwed up and didn't sign its seal exactly right. I find that a waste of time. I really do. So I just want to make that comment and issuing a letter of caution, please, in his jacket for this. I can't vote for this. Just my opinion.
If it helps at all, and again, obviously it's up to you, we could do a letter of information just explaining the seal requirements in greater detail. And ultimately, it still comes up as a flag on the file that a letter has been sent. But we do distinguish in legal between an information letter and a warning. But I defer to the board, obviously.
Do we have a motion?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion because it is in our laws and rules. And I understand Mr. Thompson's frustration with it, but if that's not something that we want to try to do, then we need to change the parameters of what our rule says as far as sealing, because this could be an honest, easy mistake, and the next person's could be something that's a little bit more. I do understand the frustration, but.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, I said make a motion.
Okay.
Then I had to editorialize.
Oh, all right. Okay. All right, we have a motion on the table. Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Discussion, Kathy.
Yeah, I just want to ask for clarification on the when I read what you wrote here, it says that the license number appearing on the seal not matching a licensed Tennessee registrant. Was that also because it didn't copy?
Yes. So
okay.
The number it was just dropped the one off. It got caught up kind of in the same, in the seal behind you that's got the picture. It cut, wherever it was, it cut the one off the end of his license number.
Okay.
So you add the one, and there he is.
Okay. So there wasn't any devious intent on his part of, I'm going to put number 123, but I'm really number 789.
No. And if it helps, Codes, when they sent it over, sent me an email saying they weren't even sure they should, but they just felt better safe than sorry.
Didn't realize they looked at the seal numbers that closely.
Yeah, I think they went to plug it in and said no one came up, but then he told them it was an error, and they said they just felt strange about it. And then they specifically knew it was supposed to cross the edges and that it didn't, so that they thought they'd send it my way.
Yes. Would Mr. Campbell, would you entertain a friendly amendment to issue a letter of, I believe it's instruction? Is that what?
Yes.
In lieu of a letter of warning?
I can amend my motion to that. I think that's fairly suitable.
Thank you.
No, I think that's a good idea, and like I said, it's just and understand. But in the world we are living in, with technology, sending something out without checking something, I mean that could issue. Well, you understand where I'm coming from.
Thank you,
I would
Campbell.
definitely. That'd be fine.
And again, for clarification for his own, to help him too, tell him what the rule number is, so when he looks it up, he can see exactly. Again, like Sarah said, there's a picture in there of how to do it. It shouldn't be that hard.
And just for the board's information, the way that I usually structure my letter, I've changed them since maybe ones you've seen in the past. I tend to be, you know me, I'm a little more verbose anyway, but I usually copy the relevant rule in its entirety, and then we include a hyperlink that they can follow to see all the rules and all the statutes. So that's something that we've kind of played with recently, so it might be different than what you've seen.
Motion has been amended as the second was made. Okay, and you're good with that? Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, we have the motion on the table. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
All right, I have some cases on represent for you. The number 8 is 2017-070401. This is professional engineer. Originally, this came before the board, and we assessed a $1,000 civil penalty, as well as the requirement of completion of 24 professional development hours, as well as the laws and rules examination. This discipline was imposed because the respondent had submitted a listing of all the professional development hours they have taken, but couldn't supply the supporting documentation. Staff attempted to work with him. I'm still to this day, to be honest, a little confused on why you can't reach out to the service providers of these PDHs to get the evidence, but the respondent is just sure that they won't give it to him. He's at the end of his career. He's recently put his license in an inactive retired status, and he, as a result of that, he requested as a formal settlement offer if we could not require the hours as well as drop the penalty to $500. He said that his request was based on the fact that he has gone retired, that he did do the hours, that he just can't get the supporting documentation or doesn't seem to understand how to do that, and then that was his request. So since it was a formal settlement and we're not dealing with an active licensee anymore, I thought it was at least valid to bring to your attention and to let you entertain it. From legal's perspective, I think it's not an unreasonable settlement by any means, so I'll defer to you, but I also think your original penalty was reasonable and based on what we typically do. So really it's in your hand, but I would recommend taking it to close it out, considering we're not pursuing an active licensee anymore.
Okay, you've heard the legal report and their recommendation. Do we have a motion?
Make the motion that we accept the legal's recommendations.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Kathy?
This guy really retired?
He is really retired. He's retired in a couple other jurisdictions too. So he's working his way out of practice, and he's I don't remember his exact age, but he's well within a reasonable retirement age period. So.
Well, my thoughts are, I just don't think it's really the intent of the board to punish people that are no longer practicing. There's nothing good that comes out of. It's not that he shouldn't be told, but I just have a hard time taking $500 out of somebody's pocket when they're literally retired. If he's literally retired,
I always disclaim they tell me that, and they can reactivate at any point. But it
Right.
seems to be that he's
41 years of practice. God bless him. I hope so.
Yes.
You know, for all of us. Would the motion entertain a drop to $100 or $250 or something substantially less than $500? I hate that the state takes money out of a retiree's pocketbook. That's my point.
I will accept the recommendation if you'll make one.
Okay, I'd like to recommend a $100 fine in lieu of the $500. If you would accept that amendment.
Point of order here. Yeah, I accept that amendment to adjust the fine to $100.
Thank you, Rick.
I apologize, members of the board. Under our civil penalty guidelines, the minimum penalty is $500.
But can I rescind my my motion and make a new motion then? I make a motion that we dismiss this case and no fine, because I know how hard it is to sometimes get documentation about your continuing education hours. So I recommend that we dismiss this case.
Second.
Add a letter. I'm sorry, I apologize to interrupt a second. A letter of warning or anything would you like it to be a pure close?
I just want to close it.
Okay, sounds fine.
41 years, it doesn't deserve a letter. Thank you.
Amended your motion, the second?
I'm good.
You're good? Did you have any comment?
I just want to make sure that we don't set a precedent and start causing problems in the future. Not disagreeing, he's worked hard. I really find it hard to believe he can't get a single certificate from any PDH. You know, I just find that hard. But anyway, I just don't want us to set a precedent that people use certain things as an excuse, and that's my only comment. I'm not disagreeing with what y'all are saying. I just want us to look look at it a bigger picture. So.
Have a motion and a second, and
Frank,
we
just
have discussion.
One other comment. I agree with Susan that it's very clear to anybody in practice right now that you have to document continuing education. Second thing is, if we dismiss this with nothing to put in a file and he reactivates, there's nothing to indicate that he ever committed an error. I think there ought to be at least something in a file that flags this individual if he ever does reactivate, so that we know very clearly what happened.
As a possible, just kind of taking both ideas as a possible solution of what we can do in legal, if the board, one of the things we do have as a function, and it's actually been improved since we went centralized, is a close and flag feature. So it is we could potentially just say, hey, if while your license is inactive or remains retired, we will just close this. However, if you reinitiate your license or go back into active practice, you're going to have to come and address this issue with us again. And so that is another potential that we could look at.
Do I have to amend my motion again, or
If you
can
want to
we
amend to say and flag, then
and flag? Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's my second. Yeah.
Second, nodding his head, so I'm assuming.
Second is okay with the amended motion.
You like the flag?
I like the flag. I'm not sure exactly in what context it is in the sentence that we're using, but we'll act like I do.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any other discussion? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
We have one opposed.
Our final represent today is 2017-043151. This is a professional engineer that Mr. Campbell has so diligently helped me with through the investigation. The last time you heard this case, the recommendation was to have an informal conference, and Robert and I have done that. We've met with the engineer in this case. Just as some background, this respondent was hired to conduct an inspection of a residential footing and foundation. The complainant states that the home was built in 2014, but respondent never submitted his letter to the codes office until June of 2015, after both codes and the homeowner had to ask multiple times for the letter. The letter produced was quite short, basically stated, I went there, I looked at it, and everything's up to code. In the professional way you all would say that. The homeowner even alleged that the respondent never went to the site. Through our investigation, Robert and I working together, we were able to gather a lot of documents, but unfortunately this respondent didn't write down any measurements when he conducted this inspection, did not take photographs of that. However, Robert, I'll turn it kind of over to him a little bit. We did have the opportunity to question him on his knowledge of the relevant building codes, the IBC 2012. And so I'll let Robert speak to it, but kind of our conclusion and takeaway was that the individual is aware of the building codes, does seem knowledgeable, and it would be difficult for us to prove that he did not go there. And so we took a moment to talk to him about the necessity of writing things down and documenting. So with Robert expanding on it, I think our conclusion was that a letter of instruction explaining best practices of record keeping, because it's not really a violation necessarily, but it definitely would help all of us in the future know that you did the things that you were supposed to do. So Robert, if you have anything you'd like to add about this case, I'll turn it to you.
I'll just real quick, I asked him about IBC. He knew that it was the foundation part of the code and went through some details of that. He also described his site visit about using a probing rod every so many feet. He talked about standoffs on the rebar spacing that was there, and even discussed an issue where on one of the sides there was a low spot, and went through some other things as far as details of the footing. And his excuse was he was not very technically savvy about taking pictures, but whatever. But he did go through the site, described what he did on the site, described, again, the relevant codes, and to me it seemed pretty clear that he had been there and he had done his duty. He just didn't follow up with some of the paperwork, and I talked to him a little bit about that and said, that's really as important as what we do anymore is to follow up with documentation to make sure that, and he agreed, and I think the point was made. But I, as I said before in the complaint, I don't believe the footing had anything to do with the failure, as well as backup from another structural engineer that investigated the home. I just think he was a little sloppy in his record keeping, but I don't know that there's anything in our statute or anything that says record keeping is being sloppy, and it is something that we punish people for. But I did want to put a letter of instruction just to kind of let him know that was more important than he seemed to think it was. I will, I suppose, recuse myself from voting since I am here.
Okay. You've heard the report. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the recommendations made.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or any other discussion?
Yes. Just,
okay.
I'm assuming he was paid for what he did, and this guy's a licensed engineer. I don't know, Robert, was he?
Yeah, I mean, he's a licensed engineer, and he's actually was is some relation to a builder that I know, and the builder would have made sure that everything's in pretty good shape.
Just from a chronology standpoint, it says the home was built in 2014, but he said he didn't complete his review until January of 2015.
That's when he actually sent the letter in to them.
But the letter was sent in June of 2015.
Yeah, but he did his inspection around November of 2014.
He said the respondent claims he conducted the inspection on January 15, 2015.
That should be.
Should be 14,
Should
Robert.
be 14,
I
yeah.
apologize. That was probably a typo
Yeah.
on my part.
Okay.
Thanks, Alton, for
I
doing
was going to say,
that. I'll
how
correct that for
could
the
he
minutes.
say to determine what the rebar spacing was if the home was already built?
Rated.
And probably had some sort of a vapor barrier down on it or dirt over
It
the
was actually
footings?
the home was started in November of 2014. I don't think it wasn't built by 2014.
Yeah, that's why I was asking
Yeah, it
the
was just
chronology question.
If I recall, I think the homeowner had stated that, but it didn't seem to fit, which might have been why I included it in my original for the November date.
I had the building
but-
permits,
Mhm.
and when they were pulled, and the chronology of what he said was in line with.
So it's probable that he
certificate of
actually-
occupancy and all that was.
Okay.
I think it started in that in the November time frame. He came out shortly thereafter, January-ish, and then, but they didn't receive the letter until later in the spring.
I recommend that we at least clean this up to get the dates somewhat more accurate if we can.
Absolutely. I'll correct those for the minutes so that they reflect what is in the record. And if there is a discrepancy of what the parties actually stated, I'll make sure to note that that's where that discrepancy came so future readers can understand the timeline.
Okay, we've heard the report. Do we have a motion? Already made one? Guys, it's been so long ago.
Hey, Ricky, did we get a second?
We got a second.
Kathy
second.
Okay, that's right. All right.
Okay. Thanks for straightening me out. We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? There being no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Members of the board, now I have that last issue I wanted to discuss with you in order. So just to give you a goal of what I'm looking for. We have had the goal of what I'm about to tell you is looking and seeking authority from this board in order to contract with an expert witness to assist us in a complaint review. Ricky and Frank, this may all sound familiar. I've talked with both of them through the work and Robert as well about this complaint. I apologize, Ricky, when you asked me earlier about things you might have said. I totally forgot that I needed to talk about this. I didn't mean to trap you. So this is kind of the history of the complaint. We received a complaint from a deputy, I'm just going to say the department, the Deputy Commissioner of TDOT filed a complaint with this board alleging incompetence on the behalf of a large-scale project that they were involved in for both the architect and engineer that were licensed on the job. It's a quite extensive allegation related to what sorts of wood types and wind treatment needs to occur when things are exposed to the elements, and also what kind of requirements would be needed for seismic activity because this construction, it takes place in a seismic area of our state. I sent this off to Ricky at first to look at, and we had a very good discussion. I appreciate him very much to let me understand the scale of what these allegations are and the parties involved. And through our discussion, Mr. Bursai and I concluded that it is unlikely any member of this board would not know the parties, all of them involved. These are large-scale players in the state, not even including TDOT. And so as a result, we talked about a possible solution, because obviously the position I'm in is I need somebody with knowledge to tell me whether these plans in the context of an engineer and architect were competent or whether they did anything inappropriate. As a result, I talked a little bit with Frank about potentially finding someone in our West Tennessee area that would be familiar with seismic activity. At the same time, I also initiated a conversation within the department, just because you're talking about inter-department agencies interacting, deputy commissioners. And it quickly became apparent to me that the cost of this is going to be quite significant, and as a result, it is going to, instead of what I originally intended was just to get a good recommendation from you all, reach out to that person and contract with them, it's likely going to require that we actually have to go through the bidding process, through the RFQ process. And so as a result of that and the potential costs, I talked with my deputy counsel, and they believe that the cost could be, and this could include the hearing, it could not, between $15,000 and $30,000 in order to contract with a seismic expert, contract possibly even with an architect as well if that's needed, in order to ascertain which professions and where they may have misstepped or not misstepped. Unfortunately, to be frank, I was hoping that litigation would come out of this and we could kind of take a secondary role and watch, but unfortunately, due to the sensitivity of the project, that is not something that we can rely on. And so I definitely want this board to have these facts before them, but in an articulate way. And so I'm coming before you to see, honestly, just to ask you if that's something that you all are comfortable with. I can't guarantee what the costs are. That is my best guess. Most of my cases where I've contracted with an expert witness haven't been at this level of expertise, and those cases have all resolved. Usually as soon as you contract with an expert, parties want out because of the expense. So this would be probably the first time where I would see an expert through. So I apologize that I can't be more exact on what we're looking at. But some of that also comes from the fact that it'll need to be an anonymous bid process, so I just won't really know the cost. But I wanted to reach out to you, get your thoughts on it, let you know that that's where it's at. It's not forgotten. It has been with us a while due to a lot of meetings internally of how to handle this. And so I just wanted to reach out and see what your thoughts were and see if you wanted to, if you would grant me permission to start that process, or if you don't. That is really with you all on what you'd like to do. And if you have more detailed questions, I'll do my very best to answer them about the complaint, trying as best I can to keep at least our licensees anonymous and the project anonymous. But at this point, I think it's important to understand the agencies involved. Sure.
Just a question in regard to how the expert witness is funded. Not knowing what it might be, $15,000 to $30,000. That doesn't surprise me. But will that be coming directly out of our funds?
Yes.
And if, but we'll know a little bit more about what that limit might be.
Yes, typically how I've done it in the past is we go ahead and go high on the contract bid. The ones that we've done in the past where I've contracted with large-scale CPA forensics firms, we would just go ahead and say we anticipate $50,000 in expense. I'm working a case on that. We will not get anywhere near that, but that's what we bid the contract at, because it will take about 6 months to go through this process with centralized procurement office. I've been down the road. It's a long road. And so we don't want to have to do it again when we're in the middle of litigation and there are discovery deadlines and judges. And so we try to go as high as possible. And then if we hit that point, you'll know, because I'll have to come back for you for approval. So that's kind of, I think, what they anticipate to look at in this scenario.
This is an issue that's come to the board, do we have an alternative to hiring an expert? I mean, what is our alternative, because
Sure.
we have to deal with it? I mean, we can't just...
Sure. I have a couple of ideas. I'm trying to think of this myself. One idea is just to not do anything. That's always an option. The second option is that I could send it out to all the members of the board to see if someone knows something, but then ultimately the hearing would need to be before an ALJ alone. So I think I agree with Ricky. I think it's going to be difficult to find someone both without a conflict and with the expertise to look at the seismic building, even with our esteemed panel here. So that is an option. Is I could just send this around so that you all can make a judgment call on whether you want to do this, and then just knowing when we move forward, there won't be a panel of you all to hear it. This is, I apologize if there's a process on this. Another kind of more creative idea I had was maybe we could form a small informal committee that can look at this, look at the facts, talk in a committee meeting setting on whether they want to pursue the expert witness, and that way you have the documents we have in front of you, and that way you can make a better educated decision on whether this is based on the facts we have you'd like to proceed, maybe more like a one-time committee. That way some of the members wouldn't be exposed to the information, and they can still serve as a panel and a decider if this were to go to a hearing. So those are some of the options I had thought of. Obviously open to more. This is my first time running into this, and in fact it took me a minute to realize kind of what I had stepped in to some extent. Sure, Kathy. Yeah.
So are these two people already going to have to recuse themselves?
Yes, especially at the hearing, just because most of the documents Frank and Ricky, at least Ricky has seen all the documents. I think Frank and I talked about the need for seismic and who the parties were, so I would defer to him in his judgment on a recusal, but Ricky most likely would need to recuse.
I will probably have to recuse myself too, because
yes.
I was involved in a lot of the initial conversations on what to do going forward. So I don't know the parties, I don't know all the details, but I know enough of them that it probably taints my ability to be whatever.
Well, let me add to that also. I have no idea any of the details, but in the atmosphere of full disclosure, the deputy commissioner asked me, hey, what should I do? I think blah, 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 blah. I have no idea the details. He just said, what's the complaint process? And we talked about the complaint process. But I don't know any of the details of the project. I have no idea who the parties are, the project, or anything. I just said, hey, there's a process. Here's what we need to do. This is what I would suggest you follow through on. So.
I'm going to ask a question just for information. Is there any reason why we have to stay within the state of Tennessee for an expert witness?
No.
Can we go to California where they have seismic all the time?
Yes.
As an option?
Yes, and that's that's exactly what they. In fact, it was advised to me that their preference would be that it wouldn't be a Tennessean that did this. It would be an out-of-state licensee.
And I have to agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. Sarah, are you asking for help from the board to convene a committee to evaluate this, or are you asking for permission to go find an expert and have the committee determine through the RFP process and using QBS processes determine who's the most suitable? I'm not exactly sure what we're asking.
Sure. In fact, actually, both of those are possible. We could do, if we wanted. So I guess what I'm asking is, we need to decide: do you want today to give me approval to start this process? And if yes, I think that's actually something I hadn't thought of, but I think it's a great idea. Do we want to form a committee that will be the deciders of the witness, but then ultimately recuse themselves? So I guess to make it more basic, Alton, would just be, I guess I need a motion on, do I go ahead and start contracting for an expert, or do I not? And then obviously there's a secondary discussion of, is there more information, or a committee, would that facilitate that decision?
One follow-up question. Are we certain that TDOT is not going to pursue litigation?
No. I don't think that they're in a position to say one way or the other.
Pending what? Do you know what Are they waiting for something?
Yes, they.
You don't reveal what you can't reveal.
They are waiting for something that it makes it understandable that they cannot discuss their litigation stance.
Hopefully I'm not saying something that I shouldn't, but in case it wasn't clear, I feel like to get to the bottom of the issue, you really need to know seismic structural design very well, and for this region of the country, it would probably help. Now I don't know if that's Missouri or Arkansas or something, but I don't know if people on this board knows seismic structural design well enough. That could be an option. What I thought was we'd probably need to go outside to somebody who does structural design, full time in this area to really get to the bottom of what the issue is.
So it sounds to me like there's two things on the board here, and if I need to make a motion, I'll be glad to do that to get this moving along. But one would be that we would approve you starting the process to get an expert witness format or whatever you need to do for that. And the second would be to form this internal committee.
Yes, if the committee is something, I think, kind of even with Alton's suggestion, I think it would be a good idea. Yes.
Well, with that thought process, in order to not eliminate any other voting board members, I would think that the members that are already exposed to the case would be the obvious members that would be on that board.
Yes.
That's just a thought, and that would be a motion that I would be willing to make after discussion.
Only to clarify, to say that I'm definitely comfortable with Ricky doing that, comfortable with Frank. Robert, I would leave it to you, because what's important is, even if you're on this committee, if you see the parties involved in this and you don't believe that you can make an objective decision, even when it comes to getting an expert witness, it's very important that you express that, even if it's a small hesitation, because credibility will be important at a hearing.
I believe Kathy's next.
I think Rick covered all the issues that I just wanted to think through that, but I think we're ready for a motion. Yeah.
Brian?
I just feel like that we know that in the end we need a expert witness. So I feel like the committee is just another kind of slow it down. I recommend we just give her the authorization to go ahead and start the process. We know in the end, sounds like we're all kind of agreeing we're going to need a expert witness anyway, and it's because of the potential costs. We know you're going to have to solicit proposals. So because of that, it's why not just not worry about a committee who can't get on it and who won't be able to vote or look at it later, and just jump to where we're going to end up. So I'd be willing to make a motion for it, but if you guys are ready for it, but I can wait until further conversation since Alton's got his thing up. So
if a committee here doesn't perform the evaluation to determine who to select for the expert, who would do that?
Yes. So the way that we do this process typically is CPO asks us to pick 3 people to review the bids anonymously. In the past, what I have done is I've served as one, since obviously I'm prosecuting the case and I need to know who I'm working with. And there's also legal considerations, conflicts, things like that. I've usually asked the ED in my past programs to assist in that process, because the ED had background expertise in the area. And then our third person for that board was a little unique. They have it was for the accounting board. They have an on-staff investigator who is a forensic accountant. So I had her serve. So it could be that we would potentially ask board members to serve as one of those 3. But again, then at that point, I would not want to involve you in any further proceedings. So that's typically how it looks. And if we wanted to have a committee and then 2 of those members served with me, I would ask that I be at least one of the deciders, considering I'm litigating it, but I'm also open to opposing arguments against that. I trust you all. So
I think I'll go ahead and make my motion, and then we can get discussion. But I make a motion that we give the legal the authorization to start the process for the needed expert witness.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Alton?
If there are going to be members or a member of this board who would help Sarah and whoever else on the review of the proposals that they receive, would you accept an amendment to allow Sarah to reach out to someone, maybe somebody who's already seen this case? I'm sorry.
Or a second motion. Yeah.
Or a second motion, however you'd like to do that, in order to give her the authorization or the latitude to do that.
I don't know if this is the right question, but do we need to do that, or is that just to give you that or authority, or?
I think, Susan, I think that's the right way, is probably to go ahead and do the motion you have pending, and then if you'd like to make a second motion on how I interact with you, I'll always open to that.
I'm gonna do the motion on the next one.
Okay.
I'm ready. Yeah.
We do have a motion and a second.
We had a second.
Is there any other discussion? Ricky?
I'm thinking I probably need to recuse myself from even these votes here.
I think considering we're not deciding a discipline, and you probably are in a better position for expert witness, I don't think you need to, but again, it's up to you on whether you feel like you can make an objective decision based on what you know for this particular motion. Usually I'm going to look for you to recuse yourself when we're deciding a discipline, because obviously then that's going to be where it's contested. So, yeah, however you're comfortable. Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other discussion? We have a motion on the table. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So I'll make the second motion. Sarah, I think you obviously, when you evaluate the expert, I think obviously you need to be doing that, as well as I think Ricky would, since he's seen all the information, would be a good person to look at that. And one of the other associate board members probably, because Kathy, I'm still not sure that you and we may still be able to look at it because we don't know the details. And again, my questioning was along the same lines. But I'd hate to kind of keep diluting the pool more and more and more just based on things, and all these guys have got enough expertise to look at, because it's a complicated. There's a lot of different things involved in this and a lot of moving parts, and you all would be very good at looking at that too. So obviously you need to look for somebody that's an expert that meets the criteria legally, but I think Ricky and whoever you want to reach out to. So my motion would be have a committee of Ricky and whoever and yourself to get the right person to represent us. Does that sound like a good motion? I know it wasn't as smooth as most of Rick Thompson's motions, but it was close.
Second. I'll second whatever it was he said.
Kathy seconded. Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There being no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Members of the board, if anyone wanted to volunteer for that other slot, we could do that and go ahead and have our people so I can start the process. I don't know. Alton, you want to?
I'm getting the aye. I volunteer.
So. Perfect. That way we'll contain all the conversation in the future kind of between the three of us, and then when we're ready to bring it before you for the initial analysis, it'll appear on the legal report. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all, members of the board.
And we're ready for the director's report.
I think we're going to let Liz explain a couple of things quickly and jump a little bit to what's urgent.
In the interest of time, I'm just going to give a very brief rules and legislative update. I know I received a few emails this past week regarding some of our rule statuses, so I just wanted to give you a quick update on that. The rule package that you guys approved long ago, where we had to take out that portion of the confidentiality, but it also discussed application length and comedy, progressive experience, NCARB and CLARB helping with the administration of exams, etc. That rule packet was sent to the AG for final signature on February 26th. And I checked in with them this month, and they said that it is still in their final review process, and they couldn't give me a time estimate of when it would receive that signature. But usually it's not with them for too long, so I'm expecting to get that one back soon, and that next step would be to file with the Secretary of State, and then those rules would be effective 90 days from that date unless there's any opposition from the Government Operations Committee. So that one is expected to be effective within the next probably 4 or 5 months. The next rule package that you guys had pending was the rulemaking hearing rules on continuing education. And those rules received approval from our department on April 9th and were sent to the AG's office for the pre-review submission on April 10th. The next package we had was regarding the seals and indexes for digital signatures. Those rules received internal approval from our department on April 9th and were sent to the AG's office for pre-review on April 10th. And the last rule package that the board had pending was the architectural associate and the co-op credit amendments. Those were approved by the board in February, and I submitted them for the internal approval process February 27th. I've not received those back, but those should be coming up soon, and then I will send those on to the AG. And just for a very brief legislative update, because you will have your work group session later this afternoon where you'll dive deeper into the QBS bill, and that really is the only bill that really directly affects this board specifically. But just to be brief, there was the Fresh Start bill in the legislature that was regarding felony convictions and how regulatory boards can apply those towards denying and approving applications. Our chief counsel didn't seem that it would affect this board too much. Essentially, the Fresh Start bill makes the requirement to deny. If you're denying based on the felony conviction, you need to show that it has a direct impact on doing that job, doing that profession. This board doesn't really see a lot of issues with felony applicants. I don't think it'll have a huge impact on us, but I just wanted you to be aware. There might be a slight statute change, but I don't think it'll affect how we regularly process these felony applicants on this board. There was also a bill regarding apprenticeships. I believe that the A&E board was an exception to that bill, so it won't directly affect us either. And there was a few bills on preventing raising fees, but we've already talked with Bill Huddleston, and this board is on track to reduce fees, so I don't think we'll have any issues there. And then there was also legislation regarding compiling internal policies and turning those into rules, which we've been doing for the past year or two, little by little. So not a big change, but you guys will have your work study this afternoon, and if you have any questions on any of those bills, you can talk to me later, but in the interest of time, I just wanted to give you that brief update.
Now, Roxanne.
Thank you. Now us. Okay, and we may move a little bit quicker than usual, but it's so that I give you time if at the end to make sure we've covered everything we need. The first item that I know we have to cover is on your iPads, and this is on page 36. And it's only a visual, so we touch on the NCARB annual meeting, which is June 27th through the 30th. We need to start the justification for that. So I believe, as we had discussed before, the attorney for the program, Liz, will be going to that meeting, and it is one of the funded positions. And Mr. Wexler, please correct me if I'm wrong. We've got 2 funded members that they will pay for. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, so we do need to vote on the 2 funded members and then make a decision if anyone else is going so that we can start the justification. And I'll turn that over to you.
When we say 2 funded members, we're saying funded by NCARB.
Correct. Yes. We're looking right now specifically only at NCARB, so we can put through the 2 members and then make a decision if we're sending anyone else that then the board would be paying for.
I think what we would need would be a motion that the state fund the other architectural member on the board.
Make a motion to that the state fund the other, the architect portion of for the board. Is that right? Yep.
For the NCARB convention, yeah.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Wonderful. Next, we've got the annual meeting with NCWS, and that is on August 15th through the 18th. We also, for that meeting, will definitely have Liz attending. I will be able to go, fortunately, for that meeting, so I will be there. And that, I believe, is 3 funded members. Mr. Campbell, am I correct? Does that recall for NCWS?
I'm not going, so I'm not sure.
You're not? Okay. So for that meeting, we will need a motion as well as just to know if we want all the members to attend, then whoever isn't funded, the board would pay for.
You get to go as the first time, right? You're funded.
Roxana is talking about the one
This is
in
in
August.
August. Oh, yeah. No, we are in August.
Just to clarify, I know we've got the regional meeting next week,
Southern
but
Zone, okay.
Southern Zone, I'm skipping because we've already
Sorry.
voted on that. We're
Sorry,
going to the
sorry.
things we've got to get. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the one in August.
Oh, I think it's in Phoenix.
It's in Arizona.
Scottsdale.
Scottsdale, yes.
What's the question? I'm sorry.
The question for that is NCWS will be funding, I believe, 3 delegates. It's not all of us. So the question to the board and the motion is, does the board want all the members that are able to go to be funded? And I believe we would be picking up 2. Is that correct?
Alton gets an additional because first-time attendee, so I think he's funded
One of the
in
funded.
addition to the 3. Is that correct?
Oh, okay.
Right. I think they get 3 plus first-time attendee, so I think it's 4 altogether.
Perfect.
So, Robert, are you going or
I
not?
can go, yeah. I've got it on my calendar. I was looking. I got confused on the meetings.
So the board needs to make a motion to send 2 more. Is that what you want to do?
That is correct.
I'll make that motion.
A second.
We have a motion and a second.
So how many total we talking about? 1? 6 people?
There's, my understanding is we will be sending 6
Okay.
entirely.
Okay.
3 plus the 1 new member, plus 2 additional that the state will pick up. Okay.
Okay, is there any other discussion? If not, we'll vote on the motion. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Pardon me. May I back up to the NCARB? Just so I can understand that, since you brought that up about how many are attending. Frank, correct me, NCARB funds 2 members. What about, don't they also fund the executive director?
They do.
So that would be 3 members?
Well,
If I get to go, and I won't be able to
Okay,
go.
okay.
That's correct.
All right,
And
but then, so what we're saying, NCARB funds 2. There'll be 2 of us funded, and the state will fund 1, but we are expecting, typically all 3 architects have gone with a staff, whether it's the director or the attorney. So would that, does that mean the state's going to fund 2? I'm just trying to get clear because they approved 6, and we only said 2 and 1.
So what the NCARB will fund is 2 members, the executive director, and a public member or a staff member. And so there would be 3 funded, and if Roxana would be funded if she went.
Right.
And so the only person left would be one of the 3 architectural members. And
Well, I'm sorry, I'm so dense. What does that mean? I mean, we three of us are funded by NCARB, but not because of Roxana's not going. So two architects are funded.
as far as I know, you can't trade the executive director for a member.
Well, I wouldn't want to take her job, believe me.
Are you sure?
I promise you. Don't take this the wrong way.
Executive director.
No, I'm just making sure that we've got enough people, because that would be 4 of us attending. If the 3 architects and an attorney or
That is correct.
Is that what we said?
Right. Yes, I think that's the motion we have. Am I
So
correct?
it's 4 people total.
Okay, 4 people total. I'm sorry, I only heard 3.
2 in carb and 2 state.
Okay.
Is that right?
Three in
Three
carbon,
in
one
carbon.
state.
Three and carbon,
3 in
one state.
carbon, 1 state. Gotcha.
Okay. I'm sorry, I wrote down 2 and 1. My bad. Thank you.
I was thinking 2 and 2, so.
Yeah, well,
Architects are tough in math, you know.
it's new math.
They're creative, but math, not.
Thank you. We are going to go through the financial piece quickly. I do want to give you the licensing numbers. So the budget is on page 47. Again, we're tracking and I think dealing with the excess money by the fee reduction. I don't see anything on it that concerns us. We are seeing a reduction in expenses. A large part of that is not having an executive director, and that's going to change just slightly now that we're moving on with that. But that is on your iPads, and I did include also the 4-year analysis of the expenses. And then on page, if I can get this right, 52, I added the licensure information that we talked about, not doing it every meeting to save time, but definitely as it's relevant. I will be taking out the 2016 number, but this was very interesting for me, being new to the numbers, that in every one of the categories there is a slight increase of what we're seeing in number of active registrants. So you've got your architects, engineers, and I'll be happy to email this information. It's obviously going to be part of our minutes when we approve them the next time. So you have them. So these are always snapshot in time. So that 2016 information will come off, and then we'll be able to move on. But those are current numbers. Firms increased slightly, definitely the licensing pool. And so even though we have Bill's projected income being a little bit consistent with revenue, we'll probably see it go up a little bit as well. And then following that, I have our closure of those administrative complaints. You've got better headers this time, so I apologize for the last one. And what I did is I wanted you to see everything since the centralized programs took over our administrative complaints that opened. So we started the process in May, and you've approved these previously. I just wanted you to kind of see the volume. May and June, and I did discuss at the last meeting that there was a gap of time where the office between June and December 1st didn't open these. And these are those complaints that we open for failing to have all the continuing education on time when they do the renewals, failing to submit the audit timely, those reasons that the board has already previously, so we're just staying in line with those, decided that a letter of caution is in order. So moving forward, I'll just present the current month, what we opened, but I wanted you to get a field visual from the time Centralized took it over through 2017, and then on page 56 we have January's numbers, and then in February really 4 new cases. So I do need a motion to go ahead and close these with the administrative letters, and each month we'll just present the current chunk, if that's okay.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close those issues, and so discussion on that. There being no discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Now, this is an important piece on your iPads. We have 2 of the universities that are getting grant money that I'll let you review as I kind of fill you in. The first one is Tennessee Tech University on page 61. They had a slight change in equipment, and in talking to Chairman Waxter, we determined anytime the equipment is being changed for the grant to be acceptable, we'll need a motion for each of these universities. It's not changing the amount, but they're not purchasing what we previously looked at and approved. So I think the emails in both cases fill us in on what it is that they're changing slightly. So within the equipment list for the university, Tennessee Tech University, the $23,000 breaks down their slight change, and once approved, we will send them an email so they can update their records and go ahead and purchase the required equipment if the board is comfortable with it.
On what page do we find the changes they're trying to make?
The new equipment is on page 65. And then the following page lists the previous amount. It's the same amount of $23,000, but they are now breaking it down to include milling machine, latch, heavy saw. So they've broken it down further. I believe in the email they explained that some of the equipment they thought they'd get was purchased through a different means.
I don't really see a problem, but this says the revised list. What was the previous list that got revised, I guess?
Previous list is on 66, and it says fabrication equipment, verified answers. So they just kind of lumped it all under Student Design Center. So that attachment number 2 is part of the original contract. Evan breaks it down. Does that help?
Chairman, I make a motion to approve the revised list.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? There being no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. And the second university that fortunately did make our meeting, because if not, by June, we wouldn't have had time to reconsider this. This is the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. The email on page 72 is your quickest snapshot of, I think, the change. They were given for the architecture program $51,218, and 2 of those items on the email that are crossed off they no longer need. So what they've done is increase the laptop computers to 3. Making it $3,798. And I did include the previous letter, and then on page 74, you will see the old request for that amount.
I'll make a motion that we approve the request for additional computers.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion? There being no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
That might have been the quickest director's report ever. I apologize. I do want to give the committees plenty of time to update us. And the only other thing that I do want to promise that I will do for the June meeting, and definitely by the August, is work out a process with which, maybe instead of the newsletter we've traditionally done, focus on a quicker turnaround to get disciplinary items on our website through email, broadcast, and publish, so to properly do our due diligence to protect the public and not delay, if you will, some of the future plans. And since the disciplinary part is in our hands, we're going to look at a better method to communicate that.
It might be a good idea to email the board a draft prior to issuance, just so we kind of get some feedback.
And in general, I had the opportunity, which was wonderful, to chat yesterday with Kathy about this a little bit. Newsletters, as it is, are one of those things that the regulatory boards are getting away from doing because it involves so many touches, it becomes old. But as we discussed it, what's important that we do have is the disciplinary to protect the public. So if there's a way we can get that information out quicker instead of the traditional newsletter, that's what we'll work on and discuss at the next meeting. So we'll have something in plan.
I know a lot of people comment to me that a lot of the information that's on those newsletters is useful. I asked in regards to QBS, but
so I am done with my part. I don't think I've missed anything big that we definitely did want to cover. I will turn it over to the committees, and then just a reminder that in room 1B, we will have the engineers and the land surveyors meet for about an hour, close to it, so it does cut into people's lunch, and I apologize. And then at 2 again, we'll be back here for the meeting that Carter explained for QBS.
So we're moving on to the engineering report. Ricky, you got a report?
Yes, sir. We met yesterday afternoon and reviewed applications, and the theme for the day was 4 degrees, and we take those, consider those carefully, because we don't want to restrict anybody's right to practice in our state, and welcome that for qualified people. But we've got to protect the public from unqualified people practicing, and when we don't have documentation that is really called for by our laws and rules, we've got to question that. So in every case with the applications yesterday, we requested to get more information, more documentation of the degrees. So that was that took place yesterday. And I'll also mention, as part of my report, that we had a joint meeting with the architects after the engineer meeting, really with the topic being defining the practice of architecture and engineering and adding that to our laws and rules. It was a good discussion. I think useful for why do we want to do this? What do we hope to accomplish? And really, where we left it is that we would want more information, get all the information we can from other states who have been through this process, as well as from the professional organizations on what their experiences have been when this was done in their states. Did it cause problems? Did it solve problems? And we were somewhat left with the idea that this probably wouldn't change what we do too much, whether we have a definition or not, but that we need to really look into it further. And that's into my report, unless one of you has anything to add to that.
Ricky, it's just nice to be able to have such a wonderful staff. I just want to point out that while we've been sitting here, Wanda Phillips has already responded to our committee meeting request for additional information on why it is that we had an NCWS review of an application once and it wasn't even close, and the second time it was much closer, and she gave a detailed response to that. And we just have great staff, and I just think it's a good opportunity for me to say thank you for all that you do, but that's just the most recent example of their responsiveness and their professionalism, and I just really appreciate it.
I will make sure she hears that, because it's absolutely, they're wonderful.
I agree.
The architecture committee didn't meet, so I don't guess Rick has a report.
I have a very short report today. I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this be because you were able to put your minutes in there from the NCARB a few weeks ago. Mine was just last weekend. Could I just give one quick high point, and then I'll send in my agenda as part of the meeting minutes? Is that okay?
Yeah.
But it was a 2-day education training, and the one thing I just wanted to highlight that on the first day was more regulatory boards, and the second day was more NCARB. But the first day they did talk about one of the big criticisms that we're all getting is the process taking too long. So they challenged us as a board and staff, of course, to review the process. And I think one of the things we talked about a lot was redundancy and things that when we NCARB, when we require a certificate, or especially for comedy, but then we go and ask for similar things that are already required by NCARB. And if we just looked at those things to see how we can streamline the process, it would help a lot of the I'll just say negative attention that we get sometimes, because it took so long to go through, and they really encourage, taking just every however many 5 years or so, just stop and just look at our process and see if there's anything we can do. So that was the one takeaway that I really appreciated. We broke out in small groups, but it'd be something I would like to maybe bring up for our retreat or something, where we look at our process and maybe examine ways to clean it up. But I'll send in my full report, and so it can be part of these minutes, but since it was before this board meeting, I wanted to make sure it was included.
Landscape architect.
Looks like I'm up. My report will be rather brief as well. The Landscape Architecture Committee met this morning, and we discussed 3 potential applicants. Actually, of the 4 individuals who have inquiries into us, only one of them have an actual application into the board for licensure. But the issue is, these are individuals that have extenuating circumstances that our law as written does not address this. And so I reached out to our legal staff, and Liz and Tony have they agree that the wording of the landscape architecture law is so specific that we don't have any wiggle room as a committee or a board to deal with those little inconsistencies. So the recommendation is for us to change our law, and how we get there, whether it comes from the state or comes from possibly the American Society of Landscape Architects, those are decisions to be made in the coming months. But we did make a motion this morning to make sure that everybody understands that we do intend to move forward in changing the legislation so that we have some ability and some flexibility.
Okay. We're down to new business. Not sure there is any.
I don't think we have any. I do want to remind us of 2 o'clock in this room for QBS. That way everybody is back. Those that are meeting in 1B with the land surveyors, you're welcome to bring lunch because it's really cut into your lunch. We can eat and meet at the same time. So we're going to lock this room with the iPads, with everything for when we come back, because and we'll collect iPads before 2 o'clock, obviously, but that way you don't need to worry about that. So I have nothing else.
And for those who don't know, the farmers market is just like a 5-minute walk that way. There's a lot of things you could grab, like a bunch of different types of food you could grab there quickly and either eat there quickly or bring back here.
There's also food truck Thursday.
Oh, and on Dedrick, is that how you say it? All the food trucks are out there too. Thank you, Kate.
There's cookies back there too.
Lots of
They are really
And
good.
thank you, Wanda, for the cookies.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Mr.
No.
Chairman.
Ricky.
Hey. No,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Chairman.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm
You-
sorry.
they were up
New
first.
business, a little bit of new business, nominating committee. That we need to make nominations in April.
Okay.
That's how we've been doing it. I mean, we can wait.
We vote in June.
Well, I can, as chairman of the nominating committee, I can talk about who I think might be appropriate, and then we can discuss it as a group. I mean, I think some of us may have talked independently, but if I could.
Yeah, if you would.
Okay. I think now the way we have, as a little background, the way we've done this in the past is we obviously have a chairman, vice chairman, and secretary, and that rotation has been going that way. When the chairman rolls off, the vice chair takes the next position. So that typically is how we've done it. And then we've done it where we alternate architect, engineer, and what we refer to as other, which would be interior, landscaping, or public member. So we feel that's a pretty fair way to do that. Given that, our current chairman is an architect, the vice chairman is Robert Campbell, and Blair Parker is our secretary. And a nomination, the slate that I would like to put out there for consideration and discussion, and the floor is also open for any other nominations, would be for Robert Campbell to be the chair. Blair Parker would be the vice chair, and bringing in an architect in this rotation, I would like to see Brian Tibbs on the board, on the slate as secretary. So that's my recommendation for discussion. It's not a motion, just a recommendation. So, thank you.
Okay. Susan.
Mine has nothing to do with the nominating committee. I had a fabulous trip in China, Malaysia, and Singapore, and I have lots of cool pictures. If anyone would like to see them on my iPad.
Thousands.
Thousands.
So we make a motion then next month to vote on that, Rick? Is that the?
I believe that's the way we've done that in the past. Is we wanted to get it on the slate for April for everybody to think about it, and then on the next meeting, the floor is still open for any nominations, any withdrawals, whatever. So
anyway, that's all I've got. I just want to get it on the record. So thank you.
And Rick, are there any official duties for the secretary? I'm assuming that the official duty of vice chair is to fill in if the chair is unable to run the meeting, but does the secretary have any official duties?
He would be the redundancy.
Redundant, back up to the
Right,
backup?
back up to the chair not showing up and the vice chair not showing up.
Okay.
So.
No pressure, Brian.
I can handle that.
And I just want to again welcome Grant to the board and thank you for your service, and just put the idea in people's head that consider Grant for the grants committee, because I think that'd be really cool.
That's been pushed a little bit
'Cause that's
today,
his name,
so
you know,
I'm
if they had a Ricky committee,
picking
I
up
would
on
love to.
something.
It's an education promotion anyway. I said, yes, you
Grant.
should be on the grants
That
committee.
is so natural. So
Thank you guys.
Anyway, welcome.
Learn a lot. Appreciate it.
Okay, we have a recommended slate of officers for the next year that will be presented at the June meeting. It's appropriate, Roxana, I would like to go ahead and do, because I'd already written it down, that Grant be on the Grants for Higher Education Committee. So I'd like to go ahead and appoint you to that committee.
Happy to. That'd be great.
I'll talk to you about any other committees you might want to be on.
All right. Thank you.
Or the ones that we want him to be on.
Since our June meeting is kind of the end of the year, we typically try to target getting the grant applications to the deans so that they can have their applications completed hopefully by the end of August, and we can give them their awards in October at our retreat meeting. And I know this is a whole new process for you, so. Okay. And then the grants committee gets to read about 200 to 300 pages worth of grants applications. We forgot to tell you that, so anyway.
After he agreed.
Yeah.
This member has to.
Any other details I need to know about while we're on it?
It's once a year.
Other business. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
We have a motion
And a second.
and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We don't even have to vote. But
You
motion
have
carries.
something- You have something I need to sign. That application. Did you keep that sheet? I didn't keep it.
I have a 3 o'clock in town, so.
From what she said in her email. Did you keep that sheet? Nobody can,
I'm
I
not
didn't
one of
keep
the
the sheet.
novels.
where the-
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Roxana just gave me the indication that the video is recording, so I think we can go ahead and get started, commencing with the working group discussion related to QBS. Appreciate everyone coming here today. I know maybe a little bit of a drive for some, less for others, and worked out pretty well that our board members just had to walk from the next room over and get to come right back where they were this morning. So appreciate everyone being here. I have an agenda that I created that while I hope that we broadly follow it, I don't feel specifically married to it. I do think that we need to start with first things first and beginning introductions. I can start us out. My name is Carter Lawrence. I'm Assistant Commissioner here at the Department of Commerce and Insurance, and I'll turn it over to my right. Maybe let John take it away.
Sure. My name is John Hull. I'm the Deputy Commissioner in the Department of General Services.
I'm Robert Campbell. I'm the East Tennessee engineer member for the Architects and Engineers Board.
I'm Rick Thompson. I'm the East Tennessee member for the Architects Board. I am an architect from Chattanooga.
I'm Blair Parker from Memphis, the landscape architect representative on the A&E board.
Chloe Schaefer, Director of Compliance for the Office of the State Architect.
Kathy Stickle with the Comptroller's Office.
Ann McGarren, State Architect for Tennessee.
Fantastic, and it looks like everyone knew how to operate the microphones already. Because this is a public meeting, we're going to be recording it, so this is going to be available for for all future generations on YouTube. So let's make sure that we talk into the microphone so that everyone's going to be able to hear us moving forward. And if there are other people who wanted to speak later on, I thought during the discussion section later we could take public comment and would just ask that people introduce themselves before we get to it. So I wanted to start out by kind of setting hopefully the parameters of this meeting and any that might follow by talking about our purpose, working through to talk kind of methodology, the principles that will guide this, have our discussion, and then we can plan for the future as far as what it might look like for us to meet those goals and move forward. Thought it might be helpful for us in talking about the purpose to bear in mind the reason that we are here with QBS, the qualitative-based selection, is codified in statute TCA 12-4107. I will not read that into the record, but we all have it in front of us. So as we move forward in trying to talk about the guidance that we can provide related to QBS, I think let's keep in mind the statute itself. A little history as far as why this is convened and why all of you are here today relates to ongoing discussion and questions that we as a department have fielded, and I know that many of you have dealt with in your organizations as well. So for us as a department and for the board, we have had questions not only related to our registrants, but also how QBS applies to the public bodies. Because our board has oversight of just our registrants, we wanted to be able to provide guidance to others, so thought that this group would be helpful in making that guidance applicable not just for our registrants, but also for the public bodies, so both an interior and an exterior look. A lot of steps and maybe some missteps along the way to get here, but happy that we're going to be able to provide guidance on, I think, a very important and much-needed subject. So with that said, I thought maybe we could have our first bit of discussion as far as what the goals would be. The goal that was kind of given to us by way of the legislative process and the Bill 2471 that was taken off notice was that we would be able to provide guidance. It was a little bit open to interpretation, open-ended, if you will. So how I saw that was that we as a working group would be creating some guidance that would be, like I mentioned, both exterior focused to the public bodies and interior to our registrants. And that would be in a format that we could make available for dissemination online through the state website and also through other mediums. If this was something that would be included in emails and newsletters, what have you. We want to make this something that's accessible and easily understandable. So that's how I saw the goal of this working group, that we would be producing ultimately a product that would be helpful and digestible from registrants and public bodies alike. So I'll stop there, having said what I see the goal as, and maybe see if there are some different ideas, different intake as far as what goals we should have in moving forward. So I'll just turn it over, see if anyone wants to add anything.
So one of the things I understood was that there is a desire for, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, for municipalities and counties to be able to have some kind of resource to get some direction on how to actually proceed with a qualification-based selection under this statute for a designer or an engineer, and have them have a resource for which to do so. And so part of the discussion is, in my mind, is what's the right body to be the one to answer those kind of questions, and then, what's the right way for them to get the best response together in order to become that resource or the right education level. Is that what you said?
Absolutely.
So that's
I think
the
that
one question I wanted to clarify.
Absolutely overlaps in the guidance that we're providing, that it is focused for the public bodies, meaning the counties, the municipalities, and that's why we wanted representatives of counties and municipalities alike. Why we wanted to make this as inclusive as possible.
Because one of the things I think I heard said was that the board was set up to guide the registrants and maybe not the counties and municipalities, and some question about that.
Well, yeah. So Yes, that's right. Where there had been some question in the past as far as the board's guidance and who it was applicable to. So our understanding was that the board's guidance was relevant for our own registrants, and that had caused some confusion and some questions. And the hope here is to clarify and create guidance that's not just for the board's registrants, but is also for the counties, municipalities, the public bodies.
Building on Ann's question, the determination has been made that the board is the entity that should provide that guidance, or is that one of the questions on the agenda?
It's my understanding that the purpose of this group is to put together guidelines that will be helpful for both the public bodies and for the registrants. That's how I understand what our charge was here, in both today and in ongoing meetings. And I'm looking into the audience to see if the other people who were influential in bringing about this understand the purpose to be the same as I understand it. I'm seeing nods in the affirmative. Okay, great. And a hearty thumbs up. Else, or we have a chord. Okay, fantastic. So I thought maybe we could, before moving into the discussion, talk kind of methodology and guiding principles. One thing that I saw, obviously, this being a public meeting that's being recorded, is that transparency. I saw as one of our guiding principles here that we are trying to be as inclusive as possible. In fact, to that end, if there were other organizations, entities that we think need to be represented, in the same way that I've reached out to lots of people, and I've asked many of you who else should be included, I would continue to ask that. And if there are more people who need to be included in the future, I would say we'll continue to be transparent and inclusive, and that I think we need to be deliberative, and that we need to move through this cautiously and think through the consequences of the guidance that we provide. But then I do hope that at the end, finally, that we are conclusive and that we provide something that registrants and public bodies alike will be able to rely on with a level of finality that I don't believe they've had heretofore. So those were the guiding principles that I saw. I again kind of wanted to turn over and see if there are any things we wanted to add to or amend from that list. Okay, all right, we'll charge right ahead then. So I want to move into the discussion then, and my hope here is to kind of step back and let the parties that have a little bit more of a stake carry the discussion here as we talk about both the type of guidance that we want to provide and what we wanted to say. So if, to the extent that I can, I'm just going to kind of step back and see if we can have an open discussion. And Robert, I think you could be a good person to,
I get to start
us
Great.
out.
Yeah, so you pick on the fat kid in the corner. I got
just the person I know who cares deeply about this.
Yeah, I care. Well, yeah, that's true. So I reckon the first question I would ask, and this is a question from someone who provides RFQs and provides to get engineering services, what is the part about the statute that is not, from those who procure those services, is creating the issue? I've been through this, I've been immersed in it. When I read the statute, it needs to be qualified. There's a methodology for doing that. And then we go through a pricing component after that qualified person has been selected. And again, that seems to me to be fairly straightforward. But then we hear, no. Certain people want prices, certain people want this, certain people. So again, when I look at the statute, it appears to be fairly cut and dry. But I'm not in the shoes of those that procure those services either. So I know the process can be cumbersome, and it's cumbersome on our end, and it, frankly, to use a 13-year-old's word, it sucks. But so I understand that. But so anyway, that's my that would be my first question from those that procure or anything. So that's pretty good.
So to restate, asking essentially what the issue is broadly.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've got our goals, and I understand what that to provide guidance, but to provide guidance about what? I mean, because the elephant in the room or the issue is there are some that believe that pricing should be included on the front end. There are some that believe that what they do does not require, does not fall under the jurisdiction of the statute. And pricing is certainly available, and then I'm sure there's other permutations that I'm not thinking of. But that has been our biggest issue with the board, is we'll have an RFQ that'll come out, and it's obviously against state law. And we're just trying to warn our registrants, don't violate state law. I mean, that's been our, as well as protect the health, safety, and welfare, because we do not believe that without qualifications being part of the criteria, we've seen a lot of legacy issues that we get to go back, and I'm sure as a state architect you get to go fund some of those things to go fix legacy issues that have not been done based on qualifications by qualified people. So and it happens a lot in local communities, it happens a lot in other places too. So anyway, that's first statement.
That's great. I'm not sure if I was just following your eyes, or if that was because you mentioned state architect. If that was a question.
No, I mean,
to Ann, but
it sort of was, because
sure.
she gets to see the procurement side, or part of the interaction, and I'm sure you have projects that have to go correct some legacy issues that if somebody knew what they were doing a little bit better may not have been there. I mean, and that's what we see from time to time. So that's the reason.
Well, just for clarification's sake, the role of the state architect is exclusive to state-owned property. Okay. So I don't really have a role when it comes to municipal or county projects. My role and my exposure is only to those projects that occur on state property, and I feel that ever since the qualification-based selection statute's been put in place, the state, under the authority of the State Building Commission, has worked diligently to comply with this and to make sure that we select qualified architects. So although we might have issues with our building, I don't think that that's a result of the process of our selection. I think it's kind of the process of our teamwork.
When I say the process, I mean the process that may have happened prior to QBS, where people were not as qualified to go do those things.
Point well made.
Back to the first question. Why do we see, and again, this may not be occurring at state level, this may just be a local municipality issue. Why do we see pricing?
Well, again, I'm John Hall. I do the general government real estate. I don't know that we have an issue with it, because our pricing is really, it's based on the maximum allowable construction cost. So we do fixed fee pricing. We may negotiate a price from time to time, but and I don't know that, we don't think that we're procuring people who are not qualified. We think we are. Now, some may perform better than others, and that's a different subject ultimately, but we don't think that is our issue at all, or that we're not asking for a price up front, and that's not how we're selecting, because the price just follows the project itself.
Is there anybody in the room that represents municipal or county governments, or the work done in municipal county level, that could potentially speak to how, what they found to be true?
Would either of you like to come up?
I'm Sharon Rollins. I'm with the Municipal Technical Advisory Service of the University of Tennessee, and we do work with cities on qualification-based selection from time to time. We don't work with all cities, because sometimes they do their own thing. advise us, but when they do, we do have a guide to go out and help them fill out the forms and walk through it if they request that service.
Sharon, could I invite you, and I believe, are you Libby? I recognize you from when I was looking up your email address. Could I invite y'all to come up here and sit up here with us as well? I did not realize that you were in attendance with us. In fact, I'd marked you down and was wondering if y'all were maybe stuck in traffic on the way here. And these were the other members of our working group who are on their way up, and I'll let them introduce themselves when they get up here. Libby, I imagine if you wanted to come all the way up to sit with the panel in the fishbowl, if you will. Libby and Sharon, would you mind introducing yourselves?
I'm Libby McCroskey with the University of Tennessee County Technical Assistance Service. And
again, I'm Sharon Rollins with the Municipal Technical Advisory Service.
Yes, and thanks so much to both of you for being here. And because I'm not certain that I mentioned it earlier, thanks to all for being here as well. So, Robert, I think maybe the area that you were going with the discussion was related to maybe not the state, but to county and municipal. And your question was kind of broad. Where are the issues related to QBS? If I'm restating that and maybe making that available for Sharon and Libby.
And I don't know that it's not got a state component to it as well. I mean, I don't know all the situations, and I'm confident that we have run across RFQs in the past that have asked for price on certain things. So I don't know that I would exclude this just to cities and counties, although I think it's predominant. That's where we predominantly get the issue of you've asked for price in an RFQ. And so trying to understand why that is an issue. And I can't see you, so I'm sorry. I'm sitting there trying to lean over.
I can say that from our perspective, until 2013, when the purchasing laws were rewritten by the purchasing division at the state, we had an AG's opinion that said that price could be one of the factors. It could not be the sole determining factor. And I wonder if some of the counties aren't using some of the old documents, because after the law was changed in 2013, it's pretty clear that you have to do a two-step process. It really wasn't under the statute before then. That's the only thing I can think of why they would still be doing that. Oh, I thought I had it on. See, I'm not good at this.
It'll pick you up as long as you're facing it, and
okay.
If your voice travels away, the red light will go off and it won't be picking you up.
All right. Do it again. Maybe I'll just hold it. Anyway, I don't. That's all I've got.
I was wondering, so when you say you provide guidance to county and municipalities when they have these types of questions, do you have this on your website as frequently asked questions? Do you have a set list of standard responses or guidance that you give? How do you do that?
MTAS has this on our website. It's a little 25-page booklet that walks anyone that wants to use it through how to use the QBS process. It cites the state laws, the Brooks Law, what to think about, how to scope out a project, how to do interviews, what kinds of qualifications to look for, how to do scoring, the whole 9 yards.
Can you maybe, I've not seen that, could you maybe share with us what sort of guidance you provide on QBS?
Yes. We don't have anything that detailed, so ours is a 2-page document that just tells them what the law is.
that one is a little bit outdated, but it is kept up to date on our website. So, and as I say, we do have quite a few cities that ask us how to procure professional services, and we try to steer them into this process and then talk about cost later in the second step. But I think that many cities want to know cost up front right away before they decide if they want to procure or not. So,
who is the target audience of this? Is it procurement officer?
Any city official that wants to use it. Most often we end up working with the procurement official or a financial director at the city, perhaps the mayor in a very small city.
I'm not a speed reader, so I'm not going to be able to get through this. Did anyone else want to peruse it while we talk?
Look at it. I'll look at it.
Okay. All right.
I'm Rick Thompson. I think a great statement was just made. It's who wants to use it. I mean, obviously they don't know the municipalities that they need to use it, and I think a major part of our issue here is lack of communication as to what the state law is to these municipalities. And I know we're not attorneys and we're not supposed to be out there advising, giving legal advice, but with the issues that we are having in the past, the board would issue some letters from time to time to a municipality that, hey, you can't go about this in this particular way. You can't put this out for a proposal or a bid. And the only way we would find out about that was if someone would send the board a note or an email saying, hey, Marion County or Hamilton County, they've got this RFP out and it needs to be an RFQ. And in order for us not to get in trouble as architects, we need to be aware that we're not supposed to do that. And unfortunately, a lot of architects aren't really aware of this either. I mean, you have some municipalities that are more sophisticated than others, and I think that may be part of the issue is that somehow we're not communicating. I'm not saying the state. I'm not blaming the state or anybody, but somehow as a profession, municipalities and a state, we need a better way to communicate what this is, what this means to the livelihood of an architect who might do this unknowingly, and someone file a complaint, and then they're in jeopardy. So I think that, from my perspective, if we could get this information disseminated out there where it needs to be, on websites, on the Marion County website, wherever, in order to try to alleviate this problem that we're having as a board. You know, as an architect, I know I'm not supposed to do that unless it's somewhere that another state or something that allows us to do that. But not everybody knows that, and to me, that's the big issue in where the problem with the complaints and that type of thing are occurring. And then one other thing, and from our board perspective, is we get asked this question a lot. Well, can we put a separate envelope in that RFQ that has your fee in it? Well, you know, my opinion is that's the same thing as selecting based on a fee. If you're including a fee in a separate envelope, that's kind of backdooring something to me. I don't see that as a clean way to do that. I don't really believe that's the ethical way to approach it. So I'm just throwing that out there for topic of conversation if anybody wants to comment on that. Thank you.
So Sharon, just because you're probably more familiar and you guys have spent the time to do a pretty comprehensive document on this topic, what do you say about that?
I think that in a lot of cases, city officials who are procuring just aren't aware of what they're supposed to do. I don't think they would not do the right thing, but it's like anything else that we do it because we've always done it that way. and they may not be aware. I agree with the person who said communication is probably a big issue.
But your document says that a sealed envelope with a price is not the right way to comply with qualification.
We don't mention a sealed envelope.
Right.
I have heard of it. I've heard of cities asking for it, but as I say, I think everybody is just anxious to know something about cost before they make a decision on whether to go forward or not.
Would you say that's appropriate? And maybe to push back on this envelope one, because this is something that had come up to us before, and I know that the board has dealt with this. And maybe it's not exactly fair for an off-the-cuff assessment of it, but what would be your take on whether or not such an approach would violate QPS?
I think it would be a violation. I think that the professional should be selected first on the basis of qualifications, and then a cost should be negotiated. The problem is with a lot of the cities that I deal with, they don't really have someone who can do that. It's like when we're doing any big complicated project, we want to give it to somebody and say, build this for me, and it's all perfect 2 years later, and I have it. But you have to stay involved in this all the way through in order to get something out of it that both sides are happy with. Because if a professional is selected and goes forward with what he or she thinks is best to build, and then when it gets done, that's not really what I expected, or this doesn't work, and then they're not involved all the way through. So what we try to say in this guidance is, city official, you must be involved all the way through. This is your project. The design person is going to come in and do the job and move on to the next project, but you're going to live with this thing. So be involved. See what you're getting. Be there every step of the way. And I think that's a huge part of the problem, is that clients just aren't staying involved. If they were, they would really want to be sure they got the really best firm possible on the front end, and then figure out together what the cost should be, and then stay involved as you're doing the design and building. But an election comes up and that person's gone and someone else is in, and
so I'm probably getting ready to violate my 3-comment quota here today, but I'll go ahead and do it anyway. So exactly what you're saying, Sharon, about the cost and not knowing what the cost, I think is the X factor, because I've talked to a lot of my local purchasing folks, and I mean their comment is, yeah, we know we want qualified people to do it, and we try to do that, but the way we have to negotiate for price, we don't know if we're getting taken advantage of or not. If the number 1 person will be lower than the number 2, lower than the number 3, and I certainly 100% get that. So I think part of the solution to this problem, and this is part of the solution, is there's a wealth of resources on what stuff typical costs for infrastructure projects, for building projects, for roadway projects, for sidewalk projects, for parks. I mean, I think part of this is, how do you get a clearinghouse or a group of something that you all or a local can go to and say, well, the school in so-and-so, their engineering fees were X. Now, again, there are a lot of things that bounce that up and down some, but it gives you some factor of something to kind of look at and say, oh, wait a minute, that's 1,000 student, school, because architects, we know, are always taking advantage of everybody. So that's a joke. It's a joke. But, you look and say, okay, 1,000-person school, that costs X number of dollars, and that at least gives you a range of expectation on what that might end up costing for you. I know like roadway projects, which we do quite a bit of, you've got a pretty decent estimation of what fees are based on the number of lanes it's going to be, or the length, or And then you kind of go from there and you look at complicating factors, you know, are you in rock, are you this or that, but at least it gives you, you're in the range, right? And then you can start looking at things. And I really think that there's a lot of resources should be a lot of resources for the communities to go look at and say, oh, that's this, that's this, that's this. And I don't know if they're just not, and sometimes it's just picking up the phone and calling the person in the county next door and saying, how much did your thing cost and what did you pay for it? And, you know, that fear I think can be allayed a lot, but then you've got the scope of the project has always got some differences in it. And you got different sites, you've got different, and that's the other X factor is what are you asking the professional to do? You know, what are you asking them to try to accomplish based on the budget that you have? And I think that's where a lot of it gets, the other part of it that gets troublesome too. So I'll shut up after that.
One of the questions we have, you know, once you do the qualifications and you determine the group of architects or engineers that are qualified for your project, can somebody tell me what the problem would be with then taking those people and doing a price solicitation?
So I'm going to give you this not the board answer. This is Robert's answer. I think as long as you've got qualified people doing it, I think that nothing. But I think the way the law is written, that's not what it says.
The law doesn't allow us to do that right now, and I think that's what's most disturbing, at least to the county people that I talk to, is that there is at no point can you have any kind of competitive, you know, pricing. You have to negotiate with the person that you chose as the most qualified, and if you can't reach an agreement with that person, then you go to the next person. And then you go to the next person. So you can never at the same time see what everybody who you've determined to be qualified would charge you. And I'm not sure why we can't do that.
And what I mentioned is the other X factor.
Other than the
part.
statute, I understand that
well,
part.
But it's also it's also, are you comparing apples to oranges? So are you comparing a scope difference? So somebody, but you may be, because if somebody's not understanding enough about roughly how much a project should cost, and you've got somebody that's going to say, I'm going to provide all the permit drawings for you, and somebody else that doesn't, and you've got somebody else that says, I'm going to do this other thing, and somebody else doesn't, then you're starting to negotiate with three people, and they may be giving you totally different scopes of what they're doing. I mean, it's possible, you know, and that the scope part is that's the other X factor is it really needs to be fairly tied down so that when you're getting pricing from people, you're comparing apples to apples and somebody's not leaving out something or adding something additional that they're getting penalized for.
Is there a way to fix that so that we do have the same scope, so that everybody, like, because in normal bidding you make sure that everybody's working off the same set of specs.
Because they've had a professional prepare a set of plans that have all that in it. You know, that's the part of it. Maybe. I don't know off the top of my head.
We had our first public comment, and if you would be sure to introduce yourself.
Alton Public Heathcote. I'm also on the licensing board. There's a couple of things, and we have the benefit of working for 60 or 70 communities and counties in Tennessee, and I've done this for a very long time. And I think one of the points of confusion is that most of the cities and counties in Tennessee have to comply with or have adopted the state's Purchasing Act as their Purchasing Act, which usually requires them to try to solicit 3 bids. It doesn't matter whether they're buying office supplies or a dump truck. They're going out and trying to get 3 bids. And I think some of them confuse professional services with commodities. That's one thing. The other element of that is something that Libby, I think, is one of the issues that you brought up and Robert was trying to explain, is most of the people that are putting these requests for qualifications together, if they're calling them that, aren't technical people. They're procurement officers, or they're county court clerks, or they're city recorders or mayors or things like that, and they don't have the technical knowledge or background to know and understand how to assemble those. Well, the good thing is many of these counties and communities have access to MTAS or CTAS or some of the development districts or other people that help them with grant procurement. Many of the cities that we work with go through the CDBG program or EDA or other financial assistance programs where those federal agencies require them to go through procurement, and somebody's actually writing those for them, like the development district. I know MTAS, I think, has assisted cities within that process before. Somebody had asked about the communication. You know, CTAS has is it County Services? What do y'all have? Every year you have a big meeting where all the county officials are invited to come. Tennessee County Services, I think, is what it's called, and they have forums and presentations, you know, all through that conference. MTAS obviously has Tennessee Municipal League every year, and it has dozens and dozens of forums and presentations during their conference. And I think both of you, I know MTAS puts out a newsletter, and I'm assuming CTAS does the same thing. And those would be excellent opportunities to help members, people that would be writing requests for proposals or requests for qualifications in both cities and counties to understand and to be able to segregate just common purchasing from the procurement of professional services. One of the other elements that I hear you talking about is how do they know what's right? How do they know whether or not a fee is fair? I carry this in my notebook with me everywhere I go. It's prepared by a consortium of people, but it includes National Society of Professional Engineers, American Society of Civil Engineers, American Road Builders Association, and I think there's another entity involved in this too, but it's a fee curve. And it's average fees for projects, and it's based on a % of construction. And there are normal construction projects and projects of above average complexity. One's one side, one's the other. So anybody that had access to this would have a good idea about what an average fee would be on a project of either average complexity or above average complexity. So that may be helpful to them too. And if you provided this information, and I don't know, Sharon, if that's in your 25-page report or not, but it would be helpful to them also.
No, it is not. We do not provide any fee curves in there.
Thank you.
How often is that fee curve updated or refreshed?
It's generally not, and the reason that it's not is because historically the construction cost index has risen every year. I will say that the cost of providing professional services has gone up primarily because of things like environmental regulations. The permitting process has become a significant component of any design fee. Well, any engineer and or architect knows that you've got to incorporate costs into your fee proposal for preparing permits. But as the construction cost index has gone up, the cost of construction has gone up. Therefore, the fees are higher than they were in 1980, I think, too, when this was originated. Does that answer your question, Carter?
Where is that located?
In my notebook. I don't mean to be glib. It actually exists on a website somewhere, and I can get that information and provide it to this committee.
The reason I ask is because one of the things when people are talking about it, as I listen to the conversation, it seems to be the core is about communication and getting people to resources. Informing municipal and local governments about not only what they're supposed to be doing, but what tools they have to do that effectively, kind of coming across the board. And rather than duplicating a bunch of different documents, maybe the solution is kind of linking people to these things that already exist, and kind of agreeing that those are directionally correct and they're good resources. at the end of the day. Just a thought.
Is there a similar document for architecture services?
Well, let me address how we put fees together in some cases. We will utilize the state sliding scale, the logarithm theory. When I'm putting a fee together for a private entity, I'm going to look at it from 3 different ways. Typically, I'll use this fee schedule as a good starting point, and then I'll look at a man-hour allocation, and then we'll go back and look at some historic data. But I usually like to find the fee schedule, the state fee schedule, and I've got that point right there, knowing that it's like Alton said about the curve. I mean, it's there, and it changes with the cost of the project, and it may be too little or too much for a particular type project, but at least it's something that's a gauge that you can utilize. So there really, as far as I know, there really isn't a tool like that. If there is, I haven't seen one, but the tool that we would use is our state formula, which we feel like is very fair.
See maybe another public comment.
Ricky Bursine. I'm on the board and an engineer with an engineering firm that's mechanical, electrical, Memphis. And I want to try to answer the question, your great question about how could that be harmful to take competitive bids of the qualified list that you have selected. And being on our side, I understand how once you get into a situation where you are in a competitive bidding for your professional services, becomes a low-cost race, and firms are going to be willing to put a fee out there that is really not high enough to properly provide the service that you need in order to get a job. And I think it's a devolving situation over the years, and to understand how that can cost the public, the state, counties, whatever, money, you have to kind of look at it in the long term of as fees generally decrease, basically you're doing less planning and less organizing of thought, and that's really what design is. And there's not many times in life when you take a complicated problem and you're about to pump millions into a facility, and I'm talking about building design, that's mine, where you said, I wish we would have done less planning, less organized thought about that. It's normally the other way. I'm not, maybe there, but that's the cheap money you're spending. You look at the design fees that are 5 to 10% of the first cost, and then you look at the building you're building, how much that cost over its lifespan, whether you're building a 30-year building or a 100-year building, that dwarfs the first cost. And so the design fee that organizes it, all of it, is minuscule. And then you look at the difference in design fees. It's being on our end, I think we can build a case that is short-sighted to select on the low fee number. And if you have the fees to compare, most of the time the low fee is going to be selected. And so when you're building buildings for a state and roadways that people are driving on, the case can be made that it's least expensive to plan correctly, do it right. Whatever money you're putting into design that results in a better product is going to be the most cost-effective thing. Now, if you're building a strip shopping center or something that is meant to have a short lifespan, that's a different equation. And but generally, for publicly spent money, It's kind of a longer term perspective. So I think that's where the case can be made, and I think that the cost that we kind of forget that QBS, we're not saying that cost is not a part of it. That's not true. It does come into it when you select the most qualified firm to do the design. It hasn't been the final selection. You go through the negotiation process, and if you just don't feel like you're getting a fair deal, moving on to number two, absolutely cost comes into the picture so that you're protecting publicly spent money. And then it gets back to what the conversation has been. There are resources to get a feel for whether you're being taken or not, or whether you feel like a fee is too high or too low. But anyway, that hopefully that helps. If it doesn't convince you, at least tells you what the thought process on how that can hurt you to take competitive design bids.
So if we maybe move back to QBS and trying to provide guidance on it. So it's clear, like Libby, to what you talked about earlier, if we could just pool everyone together. We know that we can't do that, for example. I think the one clear example that we had that maybe I missed it in my note-taking, or maybe we did not address it, was that kind of common example that Robert gave where the responsive to the RFQ, that there are the two components in which in the separate sealed envelope, almost escrowed, for example, is the pricing information. So maybe just to get us back to a specific concrete example, if we could return there, have some discussion on that, since that is currently, I think, unless I've missed something, the one specific concrete example that we're talking about. And if there are others, happy to move there, but would like to know what sort of guidance we could provide on that.
I think one of the challenges is that you don't, it's kind of an if-when question. So if the municipality was getting sealed bids and then they sealed envelopes with the pricing and then they only opened the pricing with the highest negotiated firm, and then if they achieved a successful negotiation with that firm, then subsequently threw away or disposed or destroyed all the other envelopes unopened, then there isn't any problem with that process, technically, with the qualification-based selection statute. The challenge is, what are they doing with those envelopes, and how do you guide them on, the correct way to handle that situation?
Building off of what Ann's saying, I think this group can come up with things that are best practices, that are if you do this, you will not run afoul of the QBS law. We probably aren't in the position to determine how close to the line you can come, and that's so. On the envelope, yeah. As Ann said, there are ways it could probably work. Mm-hmm. They're pretty onerous. Why run the risk of violating? Why not just follow
I think
the
that could
process
tie
that y'all
into
outlined?
What we're trying to do here, that maybe we are just trying to provide the best practices, and that's what the product that we end up producing here is. I'm sorry if I stepped in.
I don't really see how the envelope business helps. What I think might be more helpful, at least to the counties that I've talked to, are something like the state fee schedule, which I have looked for and not been able to find anything that was readily usable by a county trying to figure out, what reasonable fees are, or the engineering percentages, something like that, because we have people who only do this once every 10 years. They don't build buildings for a living. That's not what they do. We have other people who are professional purchasing agents, and they know what they're doing, and they don't have this problem. But for the ones who do have this problem and never do this, they do have a hard time figuring out what a reasonable fee would be if they can't compare it to other people's reasonable fees. So if we could come up with an alternative, I think it would help a lot.
The state's fee formula is an logarithmic formula, and it's in our state contract that it's actually depicted in our state contract that's posted on our state website. But I do appreciate the fact that the average person might not know how to put that formula in an Excel format, and so I think we could consider providing an Excel document, because we have those in our office that we use all the time, that already incorporate that logarithmic formula that somebody could use as a tool, if that'd be helpful, that you could link to, or provide it to you. You know, that then you could keep it up to date or whatever. We house it for you because we can give you the basis for that.
And if I could make a point that with the state, we have been going through negotiations on adjusting those rates to some degree, one way or the other, because as we move forward in technology, then there's a greater demand on what is needed by the different municipalities, like BIM technology or something like that. And how does that impact the designer from a fee perspective? Because is it costing them more to get to that level, and is that something that's expected from everybody? So it's an ongoing conversation, which is very healthy, because it helps keep that number where it needs to be, because it can't always just be on that simple curve. But I don't know how often that negotiation occurs, but it's not very often. But it is available. But that's a great tool. I mean, when we get projects from like universities, our contract will have the maximum allowable construction cost, and it'll have our fee calculated for us. We're not submitting the fee. If they say you're selected and we can get through that next level, then here's the contract, here's the state fee structure. You know what it is, or you wouldn't be submitting your qualifications. And that really, it's very helpful to get that, because like we're talking about, that fee is established and everybody knows what it is, and you're expected to deliver a certain level of expertise for that dollar amount. Whereas when you get into the negotiation thing, like Ricky was talking about, if you beat somebody up on their fee, beat them down on their fee, well then if I'm that person, I'm going to adjust my level of services to what you're paying me. So I'm not going to do all that additional pre-planning that I would love to have done. You want it this way, okay, this is the way it's going to be, and that unfortunately the mindset of getting the best price on a car versus what a professional offers you. I mean, you don't go to the doctor and say, which one of you brain surgeons, how much are you going to charge? Not that we're brain surgeons by any means, but some of us think we are. But what my point is that you basically get what you pay for. So I just be careful about that envelope, and then that negotiation thing with open. If you get three. You shortlist it down to 3 firms and you pick one. And I'm currently going through this right now on a public works project, and there are dates that we have to meet in order to get to that next level of when do we turn our final cost analysis in our fee proposal. And if we miss those dates, well, they can go right on to the next firm. It's not like you're guaranteed 6 months to negotiate. So, and that's all set up in the RFP. So. Again, it's an information issue that's just not out there. It's not provided.
John, do you have anything kind of from a state perspective to add, since we've heard municipal, county, and from others?
Yeah, obviously we do the logarithmic formula, and we have lots of projects all over the place. So, we have heartburn with that too, because some projects are just more complicated than others. We don't get to build a state museum all the time, so we're unsure about what is that right fee as well. Or a library and archives. Those are very complicated things. So we would actually think negotiating those types of things is healthy for us, as opposed to following just a logarithmic formula. Now, we would do that based on our experience, and fortunately we have a lot of people with experience to do it. But when it comes to those more complex projects, I would think that the way the statute is very healthy to do it this way, is to define that scope as much as you possibly can. And through your negotiation, that's extremely helpful for the architect in our case the state, to hone in on exactly what are you getting, as opposed to a fixed fee out there, and then later on we find out, well, I need an additional service for that, and here's an extra cost for that. And we wind up not knowing exactly what it is we're supposed to pay in the end. So as the state works its way through negotiating fees in the future, we think that the way it's actually written is a
parts to the goal for this. One was how to provide appropriate and effective information to the public bodies, and the other was for the registrants. Have we kind of come to the conclusion that CTAS and CTAS are the appropriate vehicles to use to provide information to the public bodies with some supplemental information, and that now you're focused mostly on the registrants, which is where I think this board felt more comfortable anyway?
Yeah, so I'd maybe kind of defer broadly and pose the question that you just asked to the group overall.
We've got the comptroller, and she started to say something a couple times ago, so I'd like to hear that. But before I do, I would like to say also that I don't know that they are necessarily the right bodies, because they're not overseen. You don't have any legal authority. There you go, legal authority over them. So if they violate or if they do something wrong, you can just say, hey, you did something wrong. Whereas, again, I'm looking at the comptroller. That's kind of where the buck stops when it comes to the audits, and are you following the procedures or whatever. So I would be curious to hear.
Well, I hate to quit tossing it around, but as the comptroller's office, with oversight over these local governments and municipalities, our primary responsibility is audit, and sometimes setting the policy is in conflict with auditing. And so as far as making those decisions, I think we already talked to Carter about this, as far as being able to make those decisions and lay out that law, that's not our role. I mean, it really sounds like, if there is some need to have some hybrid cost qualifications, look, I mean, you're talking about a change in law there. As far as the communications and the body most appropriate to provide guidance that's authoritative, I'm really not sure. We kind of batted that around last conversation that we had. I think CTAS and MTAS could be very helpful resources, especially through those conferences mentioned before, as far as guidelines. But otherwise, it would be some other state agency to do that. And like I say, I hate to kick it around that way, but I can't create a conflict in our office. And what I was going to say before was that in the case of the envelopes, instead of destroying the envelopes, the comptroller's office would recommend you hold those sealed envelopes at least through the audit period.
The body that would be responsible for punishing violators of the statute or the courts. I mean, they will have, if a municipality or a county does a selection that's in violation of the statute, then that's for the courts to decide. That's what I heard you and your legal counsel say previously, Carter.
And we wouldn't have any change to that. I don't think the purpose of this working group was to try and expand anyone's oversight. The point is well taken about providing guidance, and as far as the question as to where it's hosted, well, I can't make promises as far as other departments that might host this information. I believe the hope and the goal here is that the guidance that we provide could be disseminated through multiple channels. So I certainly would be able to say that it can be on Department of Commerce and Insurance website, and we'll make that available. But the hope is that it's in other places as well. And as to the broader topic of communication, it sounds like there are lots of resources that probably could and maybe should be incorporated in whatever it is that we put out. And I think that's probably something that when we get to kind of a deliberative stage, we say we want to include X, Y, and Z in the guidance that we're providing. So I absolutely agree. And I can also understand the comptroller's objection to maybe playing a more direct role in setting the policy, given your role in auditing. So point taken. So we are over an hour in now, and I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Since we haven't, I would say we haven't really approached the kind of guidance yet, maybe take a pause, see what people's time allows, and then maybe talk about in the future if reconvening would be appropriate, when that could happen, in order to provide the guidance that we're tasked with. And again, if we need to continue, if we can continue pushing on right now, I think that's great. And I am definitely available to do that, but want to be sensitive to everyone's time. So maybe take a quick pause right now and just kind of gather and see how much longer we want to do this today, and then look forward into the future. So maybe stop there and see what everyone's availability is.
Up the hill for a 3:30. So myself personally.
My personal opinion is, now that I'm aware that that MTAS has this document, I'd like to take the time to look at that and to see if it might be, in my mind, and I imagine in the mind of all the people around this table, whether that seems like it might be the answer to all the questions we're having. And if not, if there's things that we need to do, it's so much easier to expand upon something that's existing, and then as opposed to starting from the blank sheet of paper. So personally, I'd like to take the time to really look at the document and have everybody around this table look at the document before we delve into that conversation, but that's my opinion.
Great. I would add on to that. I was not able to speed read through those 25 dense pages. It looks fantastic. I would also like to take another look at it. So maybe if we could make a request to make that available, and I could disseminate that back out to everyone.
Okay. Anyone can go to our website and look at it. I'd be happy to send you the link, but if you just this website and Google MTAS QBS, you'll run right to it. I will send you the link.
Let me make one other comment, and we mentioned the courts and who's in charge. I don't think anybody wants the courts to be the next layer of defense, okay? Because that's expensive for the municipality, it's expensive for the person bringing the suit, which would be me, okay? And so I've got a job that's a $20,000 fee, and I'm going to spend $25,000 on attorney fee to go sue somebody who I hope to do business with in the future, and it just, there's something oxymoronic about that. So I would prefer that as we look at this, if it's not a state agency that takes this on, that there's at least a board of zoning, a board of appeals, or it's the assistant commissioner from Commerce and Insurance, it's the assistant commissioner from this part, whatever, that these cases come in front of when somebody's got a complaint and says, hey, I think you're violating QBS, and yeah, it looks like you are. Okay, let's fix this and go on. Rather than if it can't be a state agency, I would rather have some sort of other, and that's what we were attempting to do on the A&E board, because registrants were underneath us, and since we are the primary source of those professional services, which I assume, since it does say architecture and engineering services, our opinion was that architectural and engineering matters came under our board, that we could help do this process by letting our registrants know that it's not a good idea, and that we were acting as that clearinghouse that said, hey, yeah, that does look like it violates that, or no, that's fine. So I wish we would come out of this with at least, here's the panel or here's the whatever that looks at these cases without having to go all the way to the courts, because the courts can be I'm not going to go spend the money to go do it, and most people are just not. I mean, unless it's unless you're spending $1 million fee on something and you can afford to go stroke the attorneys for that, you're just not going to go to the courts. And I don't want to spend state resources either, or local community resources, having to defend against something that we could get a ruling pretty quick and move on. I mean, that's just my opinion. I don't know if everybody else shares that opinion, but anyway.
Maybe because I know that John's time is almost up, I think we've gotten the request that we all get to take a look at the information that I would remind is apparently available. Google MTAS QBS, and we can all find it. Barring that, I will email it to everyone here. So maybe next question before we get into when we might be able to meet again is what else we should all take a look at before getting back together again. If there are any other.
I would like to share just a quick story. We have a proposal that we're submitting on tomorrow, and when we got the invitation to submit a month ago, it was so well written that we said, this is wired up. I wonder what architect wrote this. So we said, we're not doing it. We threw it away. So we get a call and said, you are going to propose, right? And we said, we don't think so, told him why, and the director said, well, I got all that off the internet. So there's resources out there, not just these. So we thought, wow, that's pretty good. We met with the director, and there it was. She did a great job putting this thing together. It's like someone in my office wrote it. I thought, well, this is cool. So there are resources out there, but it's a great tool. Thank you.
I wonder if the group would want to get any input from the Tennessee statewide organization for, it's state and local public purchasing officials. It's your professional purchasing agents. They may really be able to give a better idea of the problems they face. Now, it's only going to be the professional purchasing agents in that group and not the people we were talking about who normally don't do purchasing, who are actually also involved in this. But they could probably give you some good insight.
I'd be happy to extend an invitation for them to come as well. So maybe with that said, could we talk about future availability for getting together again? Roxana, can you remind me when the next board meeting is?
We meet in June. It should be that first Thursday. Let me get you a date.
The reason I suggest June is because the board would be convened, but I'm looking at the audience to see, would June be okay,
14th.
Or is that okay?
Yes, 13th.
Too much of a delay? I just want to make sure that all the parties, beyond the people up here, also in the audience, would feel that we're moving with sufficient rapidity here. Okay, so June 13th or 14th would...
Yes, the Wednesday is the 13th, and we start in the afternoon, so we would have the morning free of the 13th, or like this, do it the afternoon of the 14th, or that Friday if we thought we needed to go
so
that
maybe just because we have... we've gathered on this Thursday, suggest the
14th.
Thursday the 14th.
Yes.
To do a similar arrangement at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and would hope that everyone would be able to participate again. And I would ask that if you can't make it, to maybe perhaps consider making available a representative from your organization or your office, so that we can continue with this discussion. But so maybe to wrap up and kind of restate, we're going to take a look at least this MTAS QBS guidance, potentially some other documents, and if there anything else that you think of that we should all take a look at, you can feel free to email it to me so that I can disseminate it. And another one of the important things that we talked about was the importance of communication, that we all understand that QBS is an important topic. It seems like there is a real desire that everyone is trying to follow it, but maybe communication has fallen behind. So just to kind of restate that. So I think with that said, unless there are any comments up here, yeah, Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Ware. I'm an engineer on the AE board. I just want to bring up an issue that we haven't talked about today so that you all kind of understand the AE Board's desire to be able to provide good guidance to registrants. And that is that when we as registrants receive a procurement document at our firm and we look at it and we go, it looks like pricing is in this, I don't think I should respond. I think that y'all just need to, just so you know, that you could be restricting competition, because there are some of us, we got one the other day, and someone brought it to my office, and I said, no, we're not submitting on that. That has a price component to it. How bad would that look if someone on the AE Board submitted a price? You know, we have to be conscious of that. And we want to play on a level playing field, and all registrants abide by the rules. And so that was one of the beauties of having the frequently asked questions up there, so that we could point to that for registrants so that they also would hopefully play by the rules and understand, and that was a way to get the word out. So you might want to consider that too. I just think it's something to think about, is that you may restrict competition. You may not have as many responses on some things because people are, at this point, questioning in the marketplace, I don't know if I should submit or not. And if they don't know if they should submit or not, and they think they might get called in front of the AE Board for a disciplinary hearing, I can assure you they're not going to. They're not. They're just not going to do it. So you might want to think about that. And then the other thing I would say is that it's not limited at all to small municipalities or small organizations or small county agencies, because we had one that came out 2 months ago, and I remember because I came in and asked the question, but it was from one of the 4 biggest cities in in Tennessee. And it wasn't Nashville. But it's one of the 4 biggest cities, and they had pricing in it. And they did exactly what you said earlier, of they had pre-qualified X number of firms, and then they said all of those are equivalent. Now I want prices. So it's not limited to small organizations. It is across the board, lots of confusion, lots of different ways of doing it, and I think it has an impact to the competitive environment in which we work every day. So just want to bring that up. Thank you for your time. And Ms. Rollins, it's very nice to meet you. I read your article, and I asked several people when I walked into the room today, who is Sharon Rollins? So very nice to meet you. Excellent article. Thank you.
Maybe to pick up 2 things from what Kathy said, that we remember the broad applicability of this, and then also for us to think about, before we gather again, what we want that final product to look like, what it is that we produce, and how the guidance should look. So unless there are any other comments, I think we can adjourn, and I will send out some information in the coming days about that upcoming meeting, Thursday, June 14th at 2 o'clock. Thank you all very much for participating. Appreciate your input.
Communication.
Right. That's what I've heard. But I'm not seeing it written down.